The dark-haired man prowled into the lab, rolling up his sleeves to run an experiment, because every move in there has its own exact process. When the water molecules get slammed into rapid vibration, heat bursts out and the temperature skyrockets. So yeah, it boils. The boy leaned in and watched the whole cooking unfold, eyes wide with pure curiosity. It was all mind magic. Then in a blink, the flask was ready and he brewed a cup of black coffee while the dark-haired boy called someone. 3 gorgeous girls swept right up to him, and each one rocked her own kind of beauty. Then they giggled, leaned in close, and stared at Sho like he was the answer to everything. A boy wakes up in a whole other world, and suddenly his life turns into one wild problem to solve. So he starts digging through the internet for answers about the primitive world, then uses mind magic to forge cheat after cheat, time after time, because this chance at life was handed to him through pure twists of fate. And it all kicked off 2 years ago. He was a wildly inventive streamer, cooking up jaw-dropping inventions from everyday materials and showing them off like pure magic. The show celebrated its 20th birthday by launching a fresh channel, and by the end of its 3rd month, the subscriber count had exploded. Only 5 people showed up, and it made the guy's mood sour in an instant. Sho still believed in a breakthrough for his channel, and he was sure that if he posted every single day, one day someone would finally spot his videos, and the viewer count would explode upward. Devastated by how few subscribers he had, he couldn't take it anymore. So the very same day, he raced out to film a brand new video. Then boom, he's waking up in a strange forest. His backpack sprawled right beside him, and the second his eyes open, he tears everything out like he's racing fate. Stuffed in his backpack were a towel, a lighter, a plate, chocolate, a container, and a multi-tool. And he couldn't stop feeling grateful they were all with him. Then Shaw yanked out his phone and found nothing but dead air, no signal, and the battery was seconds from dying because he'd completely forgotten to charge it. Then Shaw snapped back to his senses, spun his head in pure shock and horror, and had no clue where he was. Still shaken, Shaw pushed deeper into the forest to hunt for a way out he'd hiked since childhood and knew his way around, but among these strange trees he couldn't recognize a single plant, and nothing looked like anything he'd ever seen. That sent a jolt of terror through him. What if he accidentally got swallowed up in that monster of a forest growing all on its own? And what if he'd already died, stuck in some afterlife, or even worse, trapped in a totally different world? Suddenly, rain came crashing down in the forest, and the boy snapped to. He had to find cover now, because one wild thought hit him. He wasn't in his world anymore. Crouched in a hollow tree, hiding from the rain, he stared into the dark and wondered what life was like in another world, and found nothing magical at all. So much time slipped away in that forest, and every night, huddled by the fire, he stared into the flames, heart sinking. He never even got the chance to meet the girls, and he hated the life he'd ended up living. The next day, the boy pushed deeper into the forest for ages, hunting for anyone, arms linked to a wooden stick as he kept stumbling forward. Then Snapshaw stopped dead. Right ahead, a tiny field of white flowers bloomed like it was waiting for him. The boy stared at the giant flower in shock. It looked like a banana flower, but each one had 3 petals, so it wasn't quite as big as the ones he'd seen before. Sho noticed the petal tips were faintly see-through, and they looked just like a sunflower. Then the whole flower started shaking, collapsing into wilted ruin, and glossy black beads slowly oozed out of it, leaving Sho stunned. He yanked his phone from his pocket and started recording the whole mind-blowing process, drenched in colors he'd never seen before. Then his phone betrayed him, battery dead. Screen dark, so he tossed it aside, and when Shaw slid up to the flowers, he yanked a bead right out of them. The kid stared at it, curious as hell, and couldn't help wondering if he could even eat it. He didn't slow down. He pushed forward until he finally reached the waterfall, then collapsed onto a stone, wiped out, wondering if he'd find anyone else. And right then, pain hit him hard. Turns out Shaw got bitten by this huge ticker spider-like nightmare, and in pure horror, he ripped at it with shaking hands only for it to clamp on even tighter until his vision went dark and he passed out. After a while, the boy, still half asleep, swore it was all over until a blurry angel slipped into view, a stunning girl, and when she saw his eyes open, she knew he was awake. Sho stared at her beauty and swore he'd stumbled straight into paradise, but she just didn't get what he meant. She clutched the magic wand in her fist, determined to uncover who he really was and whether Camilo had sent him. Yet Shah had no clue who Camilo even was, pushed back hard, and insisted the boy wasn't acting suspicious at all. To clear the air, he stepped up and introduced himself to the girl. Turns out she'd never heard a name like that before. Then Shah shot a grateful thanks to the rescuer for saving her. Rubia introduced herself to the boy. Her name was Rubia, and when he turned out to be paralyzed from a spider bite, he fainted on the spot. But Rubia snapped into action, using magic to cleanse the poison from him, and now he can stay in her house until he's fully feeling better. Sho clocked that the girl was casting magic, and then boom, he realized he'd been dropped into a whole new world. She twisted her gaze away, like something out there had grabbed her attention. Rubia couldn't stop staring at all the weird stuff he had. She just had to know what it was. And when he spotted the container in her hand, he told her he'd found it out in the forest. Then the boy yanked open the container and told her how, along the way, he'd spotted those gorgeous white flowers that had withered out until red berries started to pop up. And Rubia beamed at what was inside because they were nothing but tiny merch berries. He didn't even know what those berries were or why they mattered, but he figured it out fast. To the girl's shock, he still offered her the berries because Rubia had saved him. The girl instantly freaked out, thinking, "These are way too valuable." The boy didn't get why she was freaking out. He didn't think about how rare those flowers were, even though there were plenty of them nearby. They weren't far from the spot where he'd passed out, so she urged him to go look together. The girl turned red, froze on the spot, and stared at him, totally lost. Ruby had nodded back in a shy, trembling daze, accepting the boy's proposal. Then she just froze, acting weird. Joe stared at her, totally baffled, as the embarrassed girl wouldn't meet his eyes. From that day on, Ruby Shaw squeezed into a tiny house with a girl, and the moment the boy stepped in, it hit him. He'd fallen into a whole new world. It looked medieval as day, almost identical to his own, but there was zero gas, no water taps, no electricity, nothing, just raw, technology-free life. He barely even managed to haul water from the well. No status screen blinked in front of his eyes. Just a spider lunging at him, and that felt like an exception stacked on an exception, because monsters almost never hunted him, and this shattered every reincarnation story he'd ever heard. While the boy was lost in thoughts about reincarnation, a girl slid right up and poof magic sparked the fireplace to life. Rubia clapped for him to start eating, and when the boy stared at everything with a worn-out look, Sho lit up, thrilled to no end. So he started blurting everything out in a shaky, confused voice. Then the dark-haired boy finally got it. Thanks to her help, he needed to ask Rubia what this was all about. So instead of answers, he begged her to teach him magic, and when she did, Sho bowed to the girl. After some time, the girl finally broke the truth to him. She wouldn't teach him a single spell until he became her student, because only then would he earn the title of true master and deserve her magic. A real master isn't some random title. It's the same kind of calling as being a scientist or an engineer. And Rubia even carried a certificate proving she was the real deal, hanging around her neck like a pendant on a chain. While plenty of oddballs out there studied magic alone just because they could, for Rubia, being a real scientist means digging into why things happen. And for her, magic was the proof that the search for truth isn't separate from understanding it all. Ignore that, and you're basically trying to drag the cart in front of the horse. The show seemed to get what the girl was saying, and magic felt way too convenient to ignore her, so he cleared his throat, snapped everyone's focus, and started to say what he really meant. He couldn't stand living in debt to Ruby anymore, so he decided to find a real job. Ruby even pushed Shaw to become a proper scientist or something along those lines. Even so, the boy pushed back then, dropped to his knees, bowed to her, and begged Rubius to take him as a student. The girl's gut twisted with unease, because not everyone can rise to true mastery. First, she had to test whether the boy actually had what it took, and Sho was ready to go to any lengths to learn magic. The girl pressed the boy about his faith in God, and when he stared back with this dead-cold expression, he still answered flat out saying he doesn't believe in God. But he'd never seen God, so he only trusted what his own eyes could confirm, even if some legendary person promised it. Until he witnessed it himself, it'd feel like a half-truth to him. And that's when the girl started grilling him about God's miracles. And Shaw never once bought the idea of a God-given miracle, because if it happens, there's got to be a reason behind it and a whole process to it. And he said that with total, unwavering confidence. If someone claws for the truth and hunts for a reason hard enough, they can even twist God's miracles to their own ends. And Ruby stared at the boy in pure shock, because he nailed every answer like a real future scientist. She was desperate to figure out who he really was, but she told the boy, "Relax, this is only a word game," because the real test was still waiting around the corner. After a while, the boy and the girl stepped outside, and Ruby leaned her staff against the stove, then asked the boy to light it. Joe froze at the sudden request, but if he grasped the theory, magic would back him up and carry him through. The girl went stone still after his words, instantly realizing the boy was about to face the kind of struggle that wouldn't be easy at all. He was deep in thought, wrestling with the magic theory that burning needs heat and hunting for a way to actually make it. When you squeeze air hard, it blasts out heat like a surprise attack. This is how old car engines figured things out, and the idea was simple: compress air and heat will show up. The moment the boy pictured it, a glowing sphere of warmth burst into existence in his palms, and Rubia went wide-eyed because he'd forged it in seconds. Then Shaw shoved the warm little ball into the fireplace with his palm. At first, nothing, and then boom. It flared to life and snapped the firewood into a roaring blaze. The trick worked hard, but everything snapped. This heat ball burned too hot, and the fireplace burst into flames and exploded, blasting Rubia to the ground as ash coated her body. The witch immediately wanted to know why the boy had turned to magic. Shaw cringed and confessed he needed some kind of heat to get the fireplace burning, so he came up with a wild plan: compress the air. She froze at his words, because he was just an ordinary guy who'd never trained under a real master, and she couldn't even wrap her head around how he pulled it off. Rubia nodded along with the boy's plan, because yeah, the idea was right, on paper only, so it was a mistake to treat it like a simple process. He had to picture what really made fire burn in the first place. The boy stared at it, trying to figure it out: how the fire sparked when carbon in the wood tangled with oxygen in the air, birthing the element Gurungi. Sho pondered, and it hit him he couldn't even see the ignition image from where he stood. Then Rubia snapped in that the picture wasn't required at all. He only had to picture the Gorenja phenomenon in his mind. Right then, the boy's mind locked onto carbon and oxygen. Nothing else mattered. Magic surged straight into his palm, and the firewood burst into flame. Suddenly, the fire shot up again, right from the chimney. A blazing torrent tore through the air, yet there was no blast this time, and somehow the flames lived on. Tom Sho leaned into the warmth, grinning as the fireplace flames danced, while Rubia stared at the boy like he'd just blown her mind. His strength and pure talent were unreal. After just one bit of advice, he somehow cracked the whole logic of magic, and with that, he couldn't help but beam and push for her to accept him as her student. Rubia tried to breathe, but she was still reeling from everything that just happened. That's how Sho ended up learning under Ruby, the kind of true master you don't just impress, you survive. He only knew physical stuff, so he figured magic was easy and that anyone could do it. Then reality hit hard, because in this world, most people didn't even grasp the basics of science. When he realized magic came way too easy for him, his grin wouldn't fade. This was the perfect subject for his brand new video, and with it he could rake in over 10 million subscribers, turning that wild dream into something real. The moment Sho became Ruby's apprentice, his whole world brightened up. Between cleaning the house, chopping wood, and hauling water, he also tags along to help her hunt plants and insects, then studies them like his new passion. They pushed through the forest. Rubia stared in awe at a gorgeous butterfly, and every time Sho caught a breather from his tasks, he drilled his magic, sharpening his strikes, until Rubia abruptly called his name and asked him what he knew about the theory of air compression. But he understood this twist: stretch the air and it chills, squeeze it and it warms. When atoms start vibrating, heat builds, and when you freeze their motion, the whole thing cools down. The story teased us with so much more, then suddenly went quiet, leaving the girl staring in shock at how much he knew, while Rubia clocked his impeccable manners too. You just don't find a sharp mind and real courtesy in the same person that often. But the girl pressed for where he studied, so Sho yanked out a lie and claimed he was just a normal student in his own country, while Rubia stood there stunned, convinced his homeland's education level was ridiculously high. Sho actually quit school back home, so the girl's words threw him for a loop. But when it came to Japanese education, it really was something special. Soon they reached the river, and the girl smirked, saying that if he really understood logic, she wouldn't have to teach him for long because he'd master other magic fast. Meanwhile, Sho was already out there, splashing and working in the water. The boys scooped up a little stone, snapped it against the water's surface, and after a beat, a fish finally broke the surface of the river. Then it just hovered there, completely still. When the man slammed the stone under the water, a shockwave blasted the fish. Silly, so Shaw didn't have to wrestle for them. He just watched as the man cleaned them, cut them up, and left them piled on the stone. Then Shaw blasted the gutted fish with drawing magic until it shriveled, but all it did was strip water-real protein didn't turn into amino acids without help, so he slammed the fish with magic again, forcing fermentation to finish the job. Right then, the dried fish was done to perfection, and the boy's eyes lit up. He realized magic actually worked. So he proudly skewered it and hung it on a stick. An hour crawled by during it. He tore through every kind of magic he knew, blasting things into flames, blasting them hotter, and then freezing them right back down. He even brewed fermentation and plant magic into his daily routine, boosting the harvest like clockwork. Then that same magic kept his own weight down so he could haul all kinds of heavy gear without breaking a sweat. Magic that taps into physical phenomena comes straight from the world. No spells, no chants, just primary magic that makes everyday life way easier. Magic only worked in small doses. Sure, it could spark a blaze in a cauldron, but it couldn't flood a whole area with flames or heat a pond like it was a simple pot. And when the situation called for it, it could even swing into a fence. So one man kept thinking about all that while he cooked. Think of heating magic like a microwave turned up to terror. Aim it at a living body, and every drop of water inside would boil at once, killing them instantly. And yeah, that's a fate that makes your stomach twist. Soon the meal was set. Rubia's eyes lit up as the warm aroma rolled in, and she couldn't help smiling at the spread. Then she spotted honey on the bread and wondered if the bees had stung it. But that worry vanished fast, because the boy had enchanted the hive before he ever collected a single drop. If Shaw had grabbed a bit of honey, the hive would have bounced back afterward, but guilt crushed him, and he swore he had to build a new hive for the bees. Rubia couldn't stop savoring that honey. Little did she know the guy behind it could cook. Even if he wasn't great yet, he was completely hooked on the whole cooking process. The show made it clear he genuinely loved the act of doing, and if he screwed up a dish or didn't prep right, he'd run it back again and again, then sit down and eat his own work in total calm. After they finished eating, Sho stepped outside, where bamboo-like ticaretto stalks crowded the area around the house, and when he touched it, he realized it was super easy to work with and could be used for all kinds of things. Right in the middle of it, the guy in the ticaretto cabin tweaked his arm and winced pain, screaming he should have worn gloves. Then it hit him, snapping him back to a conversation from just days ago. The show pressed Rubia about whether healing magic was real, and she snapped back that it absolutely exists. Then he pushed harder, asking if it could wipe out any disease or heal any injury. But healing magic wasn't an all-purpose fix-it. Didn't stop illness instantly. It only supercharged the body's own recovery, so it wouldn't help in the early days or the final stages of sickness. The boy couldn't wait to ask the girl about healing magic again. But right here and right now he couldn't use it. So she warned him, sharp and clear, not to even try. With the conversation still echoing in his head, Shaw snapped on his gloves, sliced through the bamboo, slid a thinner piece right into the gap, then drove the whole thing straight into the ground. Magic flared into a glowing stream right above his palms, and he launched a tight sphere of compressed air straight into the bamboo tube. Whoosh, it slid right in. Then he jammed the opening shut with a bit of bamboo that was just a touch thicker and snapped the compression free. As the air thinned, the bamboo cork shot up into the sky, and Sho's face lit up as he laughed with pure joy because the experiment had totally worked. If he'd managed to film it, the school kids would have gone wild for it and made it blow up everywhere. The boy scrambled to figure out how to charge his phone and hit record for an experiment, but there was zero electricity. Then, out of nowhere, a voice ripped through the air, and Shul snapped his head toward it. Beside the wooden house, a cart sat hitched to horses, and a bunch of girls marched up to the door, begging whoever was inside to open it for them. In a group of 4 girls, 2 strutted in as maids to go meet Rubia, and Sho, lurking in the shade of a nearby tree, stared in shock, curious about these sudden visitors, not having a clue who they were. 4 girls formed the group, 2 of them, the one in glasses and the one with cat ears, dressed as maids, while another rocked a real aristocrat vibe with a tiara on her head, and right beside her stood a guard. Ruby bowed to the princess and greeted her politely, but the moment it was done, dissatisfaction hit hard, and she demanded the girl speak to her in a simpler, friendlier way. Scowling, the irritated blonde demanded to know why the princess had shown up, and before she could even blink, a girl from the princess's entourage slipped into the house, because apparently she thought the reason for it was crystal clear. The witch figured this was just another invitation she'd already turned that girl down again and again, but that wasn't why the princess showed up at all. Word had spread through the castle about Rubia. It was all about that legendary witch from Farley who scooped up a tiny bird she found, and the story also said the girl wandered around town shopping for men's clothes and all sorts of random treasures. Suddenly, Shu burst into the house, and every girl froze because the rumors were real. He awkwardly blurted that he'd make them tea, then just stood there, baffled by why everyone called him a bird, completely clueless on what to say next. Rubia was stunned and furious that a bunch of girls trekked all the way here just to fuss over something so tiny, and she couldn't help feeling awful for wasting the princess's time because the princess didn't even hesitate. She simply stopped by to see Rubia on her way home from work. Soon, Sho brewed a fresh pot of tea and pushed it into the guest's hands. The boy stepped up to the princess and introduced himself, claiming he was a student of Rubia. Then the princess blinked, hooked by his name, because even coming from a foreigner, it sounded wildly strange. But the boy didn't even blink at that. He hauled out rare sweets from his homeland and set them before the princess. And when she stared at the dessert in shock, she thought he'd cooked something made from a cow. But that sweet moment didn't land. Sho handed the princess chocolate, told her it was wildly sweet and tasty, and then the boy urged the guest to take a bite. Rubia and the princess eyed that strange chocolate like it might bite. Then, fighting their distrust of the unknown, they took a bite together, and their cheeks lit up red in seconds. Their rosy cheeks lit up as they dove into an unbelievably sweet chocolate bite, pure joy that melted right on their tongues. Rubia had no idea food like that even existed, but when she saw the boy glowing with light, she leaned in like, "Wait, tell me about chocolate and how they make it." Shaw swore that chocolate is probably born from crushed nuts hauled from the southern islands at the edge of the world, then mashed with sugar until it turns perfectly smooth. The princess stared at the floor, thinking hard because sugar was worth a fortune here and getting it was almost impossible. So the girl leaned in and asked if he still had any chocolate, and he admitted there was barely anything left. Then the princess jumped in and begged him to sell her the rest, asked what it would cost, and offered him 3 gold coins. The boy snapped to the truth. 3 gold coins were being handed to him. In this world, 2 silver coins could stretch you for a whole month, and those 2 silvers equal 100,000 yen. So 3 gold coins came out to a staggering 600,000 yen. He was absolutely giddy. Soon enough, Sho got his 3 gold coins in hand, and the princess snatched up a whole bar of chocolate, then groaned, wishing she could invite Rubia to the castle again. But hey, this time the girl still got richer off that chocolate bar. With that, the princess cut them off with a sharp goodbye and slammed the door in their faces. Rubia and Shaw stared at the shut door in total silence. Then the princess's voice cut through the air again, calling them back, and the master with his student stepped out into the yard, but they couldn't figure out why the princess wouldn't leave their house. Turns out the princess had her eyes on that device, in the well. So the girl demanded an explanation, and Shu fired back. It was a suction pump that could pull water straight up from the bottom. Then the man broke it all down and showed the pump in action. When the princess saw water blast out, her jaw dropped and she swore it had to be magic. It wasn't that at all, just a cheap trick anyone could pull. So the girl yanked at the pump handle, and the water shot out instantly. Then the princess demanded to know what this mysterious device was, and the Shah handed her a piece of bamboo. Turns out it was a toy that shoots water, and he showed her exactly how it works. The princess stared at the bamboo toy like it was magic, and the girl pressed it. Dubosh. A jet of water blasted out. The water slammed straight into the cat-eared maid's face. She yelped, let out a meow, and bolted away from the stream. But the princess just giggled and splashed right at her, forcing the maid to scramble for cover. The show even told the girl that if the toy's hole gets shut, the water can't spill out. So when the boy asked his question, the princess finally got it. If there was a hole on the other side, the water would gush straight into her. Now she finally got it. This kid wasn't lucky. He was skilled. When the pump yanks the piston up and down, it builds a vacuum inside the pipe, and on the piston's upward stroke, it shoves water upward under pressure. The real magic of a master. The princess loved that guy's pump so much she waved him in and offered him a trade. "Show again," so she could sell her buzzing pump. After her hint, the princess lunged for the bright-lit well, and Shaw's panic flared as he tried to stop her. But she kept climbing, hauled herself up onto the cover, stood tall, and finally remembered the boy who'd introduced himself and told her his name. It was finally her turn to introduce herself, Leela Farlane, and the second Shaw heard the name. His stomach dropped when he realized she was the ruler of Farlane. With a proud, fearless tone, she kept talking, daring him to say yes to her invite. Leela invited Shaw to her castle. Soon, the horse-drawn carriage glided off in silence, and thoughtful Shaw sat there with a backpack at his side eyes, on the past replaying his latest talk with the princess. He told Leela he was still a Rubia student, but to her, that didn't change a thing. She didn't want him for friendship. She just wanted his skills. And if he'd mastered that many truths, then yeah, he wasn't a student anymore. The girl also told him the state would feed and clothe him, and that he'd get 3 gold coins every month, leaving him absolutely stunned because it meant a whopping 600,000 a month. For him, all those conditions sounded like a dream because now he's got to live a little in this world, and hey, money makes everything feel worth it. The boy happily agreed to Princess Leela's plan, until Ruby's furious shout cut him off. She snapped that it was only an invitation, so he didn't have to say yes. The boy wanted in the second. He saw the terms so favorable they practically begged him. For the sake of the show, Princess Leela promised to do anything, and Rubia just stood there stunned, speechless by what she heard. Right away, Princess Leela turned on Rubia. She threatened to unleash an army if Rubia didn't obey. The sorceress wouldn't bend, so Leela ordered Shu to step in and take Rubia's place. Rubia just went still, silently frowning, and that made Shu panic. She awkwardly called for the master. Rubia's house wasn't far from the castle, so Shaw could keep handling his student duties. But Rubia shut that idea down hard. Ruby refused to let her brand new student, especially with dangerous views like Shaw's, spin out of control, so she stepped in and took action. If Shaw won't drop the idea of heading to the castle, Rubia will throw in with him too. And the sorceress finally caved to the princess's plan. Right then, wham! The carriage slammed into a stone, and everyone inside lurched hard to the side, but Shaw got the worst of it. The jolt rocked the vehicle and his head cracked against the window. The boy didn't even get to feel all the pain. Princess Leela completely yanked his attention away, clinging to him with her whole body and staring at the dark-haired young man with cheeks on fire. Kusuk wanted to know what she was feeling, so he roused her with a few words, and the princess immediately went into full flustered panic. Princess Leela snapped back to her senses, bolted away from the boy, and blurted with a red-hot face that everything was totally fine, while her friends sat right beside her. And the glasses-wearing maid was Rumini, and the cat-eared maid was Mimu. Princess Leela was 15 and already running the whole kingdom, ever since the king and queen died in that epidemic. Yet, after what just happened, she still couldn't make sense of it, and she pinned the blame on that eerie carriage. They finally took the throne at 18, so running the region felt normal. But Leela was something else. She had the talent, the experience, and the instincts for every thrown matter, and her skill was so sharp that even the ministers couldn't shut her down. Shaw could tell Princess Leela was tiny, but built like a fighter. Then the carriage jolted off another stone. She shot him a furious look, and Shaw stumbled into something again. He couldn't figure out what was wrong with that carriage. Every bump felt like torture, and when the princess insisted it was standard, he snapped at the road being bad, only to realize the road was fine, and the real problem was that the carriage was brutally stiff. The princess was itching to find out what a rigid carriage really is, so the show laid it out. Its axle is bolted right to the body, and once she got that answer, her curiosity sprinted straight into learning about every other kind of carriage out there. That stiff little cart could be upgraded with suspension. But Princess Leela just stared. She had no clue what the guy meant. Sho didn't bother explaining a thing. Instead, he sketched the exact bow shape he'd need, like he was testing whether it even exists at all. The bow's shape was locked in, and the boy kept drawing. Right on the other side, another piece snapped into place, and together they'd form a diamond. Then he added the finishing details, and once everything connected, the whole design stretched and shrank like it was alive, just like the picture showed. Then the man pitched a wild fix strap the pieces to the wheel's top, feed the axle underneath, and when the cart slammed into big stones or bumps, the suspension would shoot out and snap back in, keeping the whole cart from wobbling and swaying. The The boy practically blurted out his plan to everyone, and the girls stared at him, speechless. Their faces said they couldn't believe his invention, and for a second he felt totally awkward, like he'd missed something, because in his mind, he'd explained the suspension perfectly. Suddenly, Princess Layla sprang to her feet, and the tiara-wearing girl leaned in like she had one mission: get someone to call Russell. The maids' faces went pale as the princess fidgeted in the carriage, and they rushed to soothe her because standing there was Deadly Razil was nowhere near. They couldn't reach him, and Shaw kept pressing, demanding to know just who Razil really was. The maid Ruminus leaned in and told him Razil was a true master craftsman. And right then, the man stood in the castle workshop. Then, out of nowhere, the girl called his name, and Shaw snapped to attention without hesitation. Princess Leela gripped her nerves and told the boy, "The moment we step into the palace, you have to run to the workshop and tell them everything about that pendant." They reached the castle in no time right. In front of them, a huge workshop sprang to life, wide open, spotless, and buzzing with energy, with a roaring fireplace at the far end where inventions were forged, while elves and dwarves hammered, tinkered, and worked like their lives depended on it. Princess Leela was sprinting toward Russell when a gray-haired man suddenly materialized in front of them and snapped back to her call, shocking Russell himself the moment he saw her in the workshop. When the man bowed, he clocked that Leela's mood was bright, and that was his cue to stop Russell cold, because the girl wanted to show the man her surprise right away. After a while, the workshop finally got that lidded humming pump installed, and the moment it turned on, water started gushing out like magic, because they'd set it right into a bucket of water, and every worker there stared in awe at how insanely efficient the invention was. Russell leaned in, grinning, and told the princess the pump would sell like wildfire, and the joyful girl just knew he was right. The show suddenly broke into the details of the pump. He built it out of bamboo, because that guy wanted an iron version too, even though the risk of it snapping was sky high. The man finally got what the boy meant and nodded, because that iron device really would outlast 10 years, even if the price would have burned a hole in the wallet. Princess Leela didn't flinch. She didn't care how much it cost. The girl bossed the craftsman Rasil into forging an iron prototype of a pump, and then Leela leaned in with, "Yeah, I want to add more." Princess Leela also pushed Russell to build her a carriage with suspension, then broke down exactly how it should work. Russell lit up at her idea, and he knew a ride like that could be sold for a massive price. She knew the moment a brand new high-speed carriage hit the streets, the royal aristocracy would fork over a fortune, and she was totally thrilled about it. The show kicked off by sketching the suspension as a slick diamond shape, but then it drops the truth. It's really just a bunch of boards, cut to different lengths and glued together. Russell couldn't stop asking why they mixed boards of different lengths instead of using one straight board, and Sean clocked it right away. This guy had an eagle eye. The man broke down the resonator by saying, "Picture jumping on a branch. The moment you leap, it rocks harder and harder with every bounce, building sway like a beat." Russell got the whole thing from the show because he'd been doing the same kind of jump play as a kid. Show kept talking and warned, "If you start swinging around and get carried away, that branch will snap sooner or later because the boards, even in different lengths, spread the weight out so it doesn't break." Show wanted to build the suspension out of steel for pure power, but spring steel was a pain to work with, so the guide pushed for high-quality copper instead. Then he grinned and told me the pendant could be rebuilt with swap-in parts. Sold again and again, double the money. Easy, and Leela's face just went blank from shock. The girl offered a soft praise for the performance, and the boy turned out to be far sharper than she ever expected. Then he lit up when Princess Leela complimented him. Xiao fired up the craftsman with a new idea for the stroller. He demanded adjustable angles for the front wheels, and yeah, it'd make the job a little tougher, but the payoff was huge, a ride that feels way more comfortable. The workshop craftsman listened to the boy's explanation, then nodded his idea would make the carriage roll and steer so much easier. At the exhibition, you could tell the ride would be way better. Those craftsmen brought real fire, and they immediately latched on to everything this man said because they weren't just listening. They were desperate to dig deeper into how the cart was designed. After a while, the man hauled himself to his workshop, and Shu beamed at the little hut because now he finally had his own workshop. Princess Leela promised him that inside the castle, he'd find every material and craftsman to build exactly what he dreamed of. So he nodded, felt the weight of her trust, and charged straight back to his workshop. Inside the castle, they didn't just run a workshop. Dwarves pounded metal in a forge, crafting all sorts of gadgets and machines, while the craft workshop turned out delicate decorations and razor-sharp engravings, all painted to perfection by elegant elves. He also clocked the materials department was packed with all kinds of wood, then spotted iron too, but it was rare, locked up, and worth its weight in gold. He swept his gaze across the whole castle, passing the maid's room where he spotted familiar faces, Rumenes and New Omi, and when New Omi saw him, her whole face lit up with joy. A door suddenly stood in front of him, and Shaw knew it was the master's office. Rubia had been stuck gathering her things forever, so she finally showed up late and started lining everything up in the office. Shaw wanted to jump in and help the master, but Rubia shot him down fast, insisting she couldn't possibly know where everything was. Then the boy leaned in and asked Rubia, "Are there more masters in this castle?" And Rubia nodded, saying yes. The elven master of true teaching was inside. The boy practically lit up, knowing a real elf was somewhere within these walls, and he couldn't wait to meet them. Then, out of nowhere, Rubia swept up close to him and whispered that the elf was ancient and that the sorceress had already warned Sean not to even think about approaching the elven master. Even with Ruby's warning still ringing in his head, it only stoked Shaw's curiosity until, right on the road, he suddenly spotted Adorajara. The moment he laid eyes on her, he couldn't help himself. He strode over, trying to figure out what kind of room this was, with the light spilling everywhere. But right before he stepped in, the sharp clack of heels suddenly rang nearby. Someone screamed at the boy in pure anger, and he jolted around toward the sound. Panicked. Right in front of him, an elf materialized, disgusted by seeing him there. The girl didn't recognize him, so she assumed he was some imperial. That elf girl narrowed her eyes at the man like he was hiding something. She still believed he was an imperial spy. Then she gasped when she realized he wasn't short at all, because he was tall. During those days, the boy stared up at the elephant, because he'd heard the elves just keep growing longer and taller with every year, until the very end, and after 1,000 years or more, they can stand past 2 meters. The boy finally clocked it. The real master Rubio warned about, and the elf girl shot a sharp glare at the newcomer, still convinced he was sneaking around to spy. The boy blurted to the girl, panicked, "I'm not a spy," then rushed to add, "I'm just a student of Master Rubia." Right then, the girl snapped into a new mood. She grabbed Sho by the chin and sized him up, calm but curious as ever. And the moment the elf heard that Rubia had taken on a student, her eyes lit up and she couldn't stop staring at how he looked. After she said that, the girl couldn't stand it. She had to check how Ruby was doing, because skipping a simple hello to her colleague felt straight up rude. The show also told the elf, straight up, that his master stayed in the castle because Rubia had to get ready for the move, and the girl pushed for answers, asking why the guy who trained under Rubia didn't come out to greet her. The boy kept explaining to the girl that he had a ton to get done, but Shu swore he'd swing back later just to say hello, because the problem still wasn't solved, and the elf was still fuming. Then, she shoved the guy into her office, and the girl clocked that he had zero idea about her relationship with Rubia, so she let him handle the fallout from her master's rude behavior. Sho couldn't shake the need to figure out who that elf really was, so he asked right away, and she burst in with her name, Stella, claiming that if he was truly Ruby's student, then he'd know exactly where she stood. He answered, introduced himself, and admitted he was Rubia's student. Then his hand shook as he reached into the inner pocket of his jacket, pulling out the gift he'd brought, just for the moment he got to meet her. Soon the boy finally nailed. He popped open his palm and revealed 2 juicy red berries for the girl, and she stared at them like they were pure treasure. Stella couldn't help but stare. His gift was something special, a tiny fruit that was actually valuable, and that berry's rare ruby red glow made it feel unreal. The girl fumbled the gift, forced a smile, and acted like it was top-notch. Then Stella, leading the whole show, gestured at a chair and told the man he could sit while the elf brewed his pico drink. After a bit, the pico was finally ready, and the girl thrust it into the boy's hands. Sean's eyes widened because it looked like coffee and smelled like it too. The show grabbed a cup and dove into the pico one sip, and the flavor felt flawless, with a rich aroma and a deep, bittersweet bite. But even with all that perfection, the guy still couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing his world. After tasting pico, the boy couldn't stop thinking about it and demanded to know how easy it really was to get. Turns out it was simple to obtain, just a little pricey, and you could even buy it in the city, while Della promised she'd point him to her favorite store. Suddenly, the girl cut the conversation and demanded to know who he really was. Sho stared at her, totally baffled, because he had no clue what she was trying to uncover. In the end, the boy was nothing more than a student of a real scholar, but the girl refused to buy it. Stella clocked it immediately. On this continent, his education and manners were top tier, the kind only royal kids, noble heirs, or the children of wealthy merchants ever get. In her memories, not one boy her age fit that description. So when Sho heard the girl name everyone in her category, he froze in shock. Della remembered them all because they were her honored clients. The boy finally admitted he was from a land Stella had never heard of. But Stella still didn't buy it. His words didn't convince her for a second. That tense guy shrugged and blamed it all on the see no extra clues, nothing else. The girl hated those cryptic words like they were trying to hide something. Shaw was sure there were things Stella didn't want uncovered, and that was exactly how it had to be, because he refused to hand her the truth, so he warned her with a proverb. Curiosity can be deadly. Shell realized that ever since he'd studied under Master Rubia, Stella was instantly intrigued by him, but they still didn't know each other well enough for a talk like that, and Stella just snapped a frown at his words. Then she started tossing out proverbs from her homeland, and the shock hit. Hard turns out a whole lot of people are happier when they don't know anything. Stella swiftly changed the subject, and the girl's eyes locked onto the lil merch berries. She leaned in, curious about where that guy had found them, because bright red fruits like those aren't exactly something you stumble across every day. Shaw told her he'd found them in the forest, and the girl snapped to attention. If he spotted them there, he must have seen the flowers too, so the boy nodded along, and Stella kept focused, snagging the berries and tucking them into her box. After a while, the boy scrawled a white 5-petal flower on the board, and right from its petals, a crimson fruit burst into existence, and Shu couldn't help but stare at its beauty. Stella lit up when she saw the boy's drawing. The flower was exactly what the legends promised. And Sho pushed. "Let's bring me with you and go find the white flowers." The boy knew the forest like the back of his hand, but even he couldn't guarantee they'd bloom by the time they got there. Stella stared at the guy, cheeks blazing with confusion, while Sho met the girl's gaze in pure disbelief. Stella almost burst out laughing at how clueless he looked, but she swallowed it because it hit her hard. He had no idea what his own words meant. And that's when Stella finally got it. He wasn't from around here at all, from some faraway country. Sho was just as clueless as ever. It honestly felt like a near miracle that the show managed to feature Lil Merch's flowers. The boy got it, but the flowers still drooped fast. Stella finally calmed him down and told him straight there was no way to summon someone just to check on flowers. Sho just didn't get what she meant. But it finally clicked, for the boy's shame hit him like lightning, and his face flushed instantly, while Shaw couldn't forget Ruby's shock when he promised them they'd stay together until the flowers bloomed, even if no one knew when that would be. Then the boy finally got it all, and boom, shame flooded his face until it went bright red. That's why Ruby looked so weird, because Stella had just figured out it was him who spilled the secret to her. Confused, Shaw tried to defend himself, insisting he didn't understand those words back then, while Stella rose from her seat, slicked her cloak off, and dropped it on the floor, ready for the elf to finally speak. Stella edged closer to the guy, and when he talked to her like that, it screamed that Sho and Rubia had zero kind of bond. Then she slid her fingers under his chin, and Sho froze, staring at her in pure awkward silence. The girl purred that next she might just take a shot at him. Stella met the guy's eyes with that irresistible gaze, and Sho could only gape at her, stunned beyond words. Then it hit the guy. He snapped back to reality and still couldn't believe why Stella picked him, because with that kind of charm she could have had anyone in the castle, and when she slipped her hand into his, she leaned in and purred that she was sick of every other man in the place. The boy couldn't handle what elf Stella was doing. She didn't even pause. She shoved him onto the couch and ordered him to lie still, because she wanted to watch him fight back or fire off anti-magic, and then the room's door snapped open like a gunshot. Rubia slumped in the office doorway. The sorceress stared at them with heavy eyes, and the boy awkwardly called for the master. So Rubia quietly slid in, yanked the boy and girl off the sofa, and dragged them into the open like something was about to snap. Rage boiled in the blonde's veins. As she snatched the guy by his collar, she was certain she'd never see him at Stella's office. And yet there he was, right in front of her, even though she'd warned him to stay away. The show didn't give them a choice. Stella suddenly surged up to the guy and wrapped him in a tight hug, and he just stood there shocked. As a blush spread across him, the elf girl slid in with a seductive voice, leaving him even more confused. Stella didn't drop her act for a second. She sauntered up to the guy and clocked those round ears, then pushed closer because she wanted him to fall for her for real, and that's when Rubia called Stella. Frowning, the sorceress begged Stella to step away, but the elf wouldn't budge. She was staring at that boy, completely hooked, and refused to stop. Stella told Rubia she couldn't stop because Rubia had called her over to stare at the white flowers. Then the witch shrieked, stunned by what she heard. Ashamed, Sho finally blurted out his side because Ruby already spelled out what it really means to invite someone to look at flowers, so he rushed to tell Stella everything. Stella slid back toward the confused boy, eyes locked on the light show, and the girl told him it wasn't like any other guys she'd met. It felt like they were made for each other. Rubia cut Stella off, snapped around to the elf, and the elf and the boy stared at her, baffled as she trembled under a rush of emotions. Rubia took a deep breath, then blurted out nervous as anything that it was Shaw who'd first suggested they hunt for the flowers together. Stella shut her eyes in instant embarrassment, and the second that confession landed, her entire face exploded into a full-on red flush. For a heartbeat, the room went dead silent. Show's cheeks flamed as he stared at Rubia, totally unprepared for her bold confession, while Stella erupted in loud laughter, loving how clueless Rubia sounded, and sending the witch from Far Lane into an even hotter, blush-laced fluster. Rubia's cheeks flared as the girl's words hit like a slap. Then her anger surged. Blushing hard, she snapped back that she was only 24, that her naivety didn't mean a thing. And anyway, she wasn't as old as Stella, because Stella had already hit a staggering 450 years. When Shaw heard Stella's age, his jaw dropped. He stared at her in disbelief because she was freaking 450 years old. That's what it really means to be one of the elves. This kid just stared, mouth open, at the frozen elf, stunned by how anyone could last that long. And when he said it out loud, Stella's anger flared and she shot back about memory. Turns out, a furious Stella decided she'd rather wipe his mind clean, casting a spell meant to erase the truth about her real age only, for him to shockingly dodge her enchantment. That boy gulped as the angry girl stared him down. Then the dust from her last blast finally cleared, and there stood Stella, glaring straight at him while she snapped her magic back on. And this time, she wasn't going to miss. Stella's office rang with the boy's piercing scream, smoke blasting from the door cracks as her attacks tore through the room. Princess Leela burst in to find out what was happening, and Shaw sprinted up just as the pale boy warned her that staying in there was too dangerous. Without a word, he scooped the girl up into his arms like she weighed nothing. Then Shaw tore out of the office without even glancing back while Stella's furious scream chased him. After a bit, the man finally tore free from Stella, gulping air and wobbling from that brutal run. Then slumped against the wall. Stella's got wisdom, but common sense still doesn't save everyone. Then the girl's face lit up as they finally hit the tower stairs, and she grabbed the boy's attention up there. The top was a breathtaking view, and Princess Leia couldn't wait to show it to him. The man stared at the stairs and realized the tower was way too high, so he groaned that he needed an elevator. And it was the first time Princess Leela ever heard that word, so she instantly wanted to find out what it was. He leaned in and told her, "When we mount the cabinet on top of the tower, we can haul it into the drawer with a rope, but that only works if someone's down here to yank it. So they'll hook up a weight a bit heavier than the girl, lower it from the top floor, then have someone slowly haul it back up." Princess Leela practically beamed when she finally understood how the elevator works. First, they had to find someone to hoist the weight in that elevator, because that was all they could manage right now. The guy got it too, since this world was totally out of electricity. But he still hated that plan, because in every clash, one side claims victory and the other pays the price. When someone dodges pain, someone else gets crushed. Soon, Sho and Leela hauled themselves to the tower's peak, where the boy stared out at the horizon, and Princess Leela admitted she comes up here when the sky finally clears. When she sees the city blazing in lights, her heart feels lighter than air. The girl realized she'd landed in this spot only because her vassals and loyal people had her back. So the princess stared out into the distance as she spoke. The story hits her with a brutal truth. When someone tries to simplify everything, somebody else pays the price. And that's how royal power works too. When the rulers force their easy way on everyone, the regular people get squeezed. And sure, she's only 15, but she's already seeing the world like someone twice her age. Princess Leela whipped around to Sho, placing all her hopes on him. Because with a real scholar like him on their side, the festival was going to be a hit, and Leela practically buzzed as she told him they'd build the future of the country together. Sho got why old world knowledge could turbocharge this country's future, but he couldn't shake one fear too much excitement about technology might get him branded a heretic. But if outsiders from other countries show up, he'll sniff out clues that point the way back to his world. Princess Leela and Shaw soaking in the gorgeous scenery like it's a dream. He called for the princess and snatched her attention, then fired off that they'd do whatever it took to craft an incredible invention and make their country shine. Farland was a tiny town that somehow counted as a state too, and Sho had been stuck in this castle for just over half a month. Now he couldn't stand it another second. Sho lay weirdly sprawled on the floor, his stomach roaring with hunger. He just craved Japanese food so badly it hurt, and he could have cried. In his dreams, he was back again, stuffing his heart with miso soup and onigiri. After a while, the boy slipped outside and ended up at the market by the castle, surrounded by stall after stall packed with all kinds of goodies. He hunted through the market for rice and miso, but everything he found was the wrong thing, no close matches at all. He finally spotted barley, yet it was nothing like rice. Sho stared at the market's massive lineup of fish products and realized this world had drying and shipping down to a science except for the nearby fish, since delivery took forever. And yeah, soy sauce is a huge deal in Japanese cooking. So this man chased one key ingredient in particular: glutamate. Soon the boy ended up at the seafood counter, and the seller jumped in to help him hunt for what he needed. Then Shaw blurted that he was searching for dried seaweed, and the seller's surprise lit up the room. The seller started digging through his stuff, then finally yanked out some seaweed, but his face said he had no idea if it was the right item. The seaweed looked ghostly white and moldy, but the seller swore he'd toss it since nobody would buy it. Then Shaw snapped with disbelief, because it wasn't spoiled at all. It was top-tier seaweed that only made everything taste better. Without wasting a second, he told the seller he was taking everything, grabbed the dried fish, then demanded a seaweed gift too, and the seller happily handed it all over. Soon, he was gripping a huge bag of groceries, grinning because he'd hit the store and hauled it all back home. Then he unpacked everything, stocked up on grains, vegetables, and all the other supplies. To kick things off, I tried brewing a kelp soup broth from a recipe I brought from my world. He snapped back to it, chop the seaweed into tiny pieces, then drown it in hot water. Then you just dust a pinch of salt on top and boom, quick soup in your hands. After all that hard work, the boy couldn't wait and eagerly tasted it. He stood there in awe, savoring the soup's aroma and nailing that perfect taste, because it was the exact seaweed from his world. That soup tasted exactly like back home, and it hit him like the memory of that mom show. Then guilt flickered hard, because she was probably freaking out about his absence. He didn't even know if his whole world had survived. Maybe he was the only one knocked out when the light vanished, and that thought crushed him. So he threw himself back into experimenting with food again. The show had him grab a water wheel from the workshop to spin a barley mill. Said a mortar and pestle would have worked for how much he ate, but it was brutal and draining, so the boy snapped and decided to automate the whole thing. The kid spun a water wheel and built a barley threshing machine. Then he powered a huge motorized mortar that cleaned the grains all by itself until fresh, spotless barley poured out like magic. When Sho finally got the cleaned barley, he cooked it up and tasted right after something about the smell felt off. But the barley still ended up surprisingly good. It was just way too dry to turn into tortillas. Next day, Sho dove into an amazing new mission. His very first time preparing miso in another world. Rubia narrowed her eyes at the captivated young man, knowing something was up again, because Sho was about to shove his brilliant first move in the history of this world right in front of his mentor. Miso was crafted from soybeans, and when Miso tracked down these beans, they looked nothing like the soy back in his world. You'll need salt too, easy to get in this world then. You're supposed to use rice malt. But the guy didn't have any, so he grabbed barley malt instead, and the whole thing turned out more like barley miso. Making the miso took forever. But this world had its own kind of magic, so the guy dove in with pure excitement, and even if disaster struck, he'd just start over and go again. First, the boy drenched the barley with water. Then he cranked up a burst of magic heat to cook it. It was a magical microwave, and he charmed the tools till they hit at least 100 degrees, because disinfection isn't optional. If microbes slip in, they'd get wiped out instantly. After everything was done, they split the steamed barley into little portions, and the boy cast magic to force it to grow only for something to start showing up. Ruby swore it was mold, and the girl snapped that this dish was ruined and couldn't be eaten. But Shaw leaned in, calming her down, and told her those yellow spots on the barley weren't plain mold at all. They were sesame mold, and yeah, miso in Japan is ruled by white mold, but here it's mutated into something far worse. That amount should cover it. Koji will be ready soon. After a little while, the sorceress inhaled a gorgeous sweet scent drifting up from the grain. When that wild aroma hit the air, the beans got steamed and mashed again inside a magical microwave, and then Shaw and Rubia carefully stirred in the salt and barley malt by hand. Then they churned them into balls, and Ruby eyed that guy like something was off. She still thought the dish was totally inedible, but he swore that if the fermentation took right, it would taste amazing. Then they shoved it all into a sterilized jar and clamped the lid down so tight it wouldn't budge. The show cast a spell to turbocharge the fermentation, and the whole maturation took about an hour, with breaks in between. While the guy weirdly just sat on the floor, Rubia sipped her tea like it was nothing, and everyone stood there on pins and needles, waiting for the preparation. With a flick of magic, the boy crushed the cooking time from nearly a year down to just 1 hour, and boom, the dish was done in time. Sho popped the jar open, leaned in, and breathed in the sweet, finished miso aroma like it was pure victory. Miso from another world sat steaming and ready to be devoured, and the boy stared at it like it was pure treasure. Ruby still didn't trust him because she had never even heard of miso, while everyone else was busy elsewhere. Nemu cat-eared and sweeping the castle courtyard, worked in the distance, nose twitching, desperate to track down where that sweet smell from the Shaw house was coming from. He waved the girl over and proudly showed her what he'd cooked miso soup with pork, and when she blinked like she'd never heard of it, he told her it was a dish from his homeland, whipping up the broth with kombu and dried fish. Miso soup came packed with potatoes, onions, and carrots, but he couldn't find a single thing that looked like radish. Then he piled up barley rice, fried some meat, and served it all alongside the miso like a full-on feast. Soon he slammed all the dishes onto the table and fragrant steam curled through the room. The merby dropped sticks right beside them, and suddenly it didn't feel like a guess anymore. It was real Japanese food. The boy choked back tears as he ate the food he'd made, and even with that familiar taste, he swore he could feel the Japanese spirit in every bite. Then he urged Rubia not to be shy and to try the dishes, but she hesitated, scared of all the new flavors. Right then, someone pounded on Sho's house door, and with the knock came a voice shouting his name. It was the brand new maid, lured in by the smell of food, and she demanded to know what was cooking. Then the boy dared the maid to take a bite of the food he'd just made, and the girl who came to the table froze in shock. Nemu recoiled at the strange food, convinced the guy had cooked up meals from insect eggs because that barley looked just like it, and the miso scared her too, the cloudy water making it feel far too suspicious. Shaw snapped at the girl that he wouldn't hand it over, then insisted it was only pig soup. Right then, Stella barged into the room, and the elf called out Shaw's name. Princess Leela burst into the room right alongside Stella. The boy greeted them both, and right away the two of them caught a mouth-watering smell of food, because yes, Stella was starving. But he didn't even flinch at the uninvited guests, because he'd already stacked the table with tons of food, and that mouth-watering aroma would pull everyone in. He wasn't sure if they'd actually love it, but he served them anyway. After tasting the food, Nasimu's face lit up. She stared at the dishes like they were treasure and tore into them greedily, because every bite was insanely delicious. Seeing her delighted, Rubia couldn't help herself and wanted to taste too. Rubia took one bite of the soup, and suddenly the flavor hit her like a sweet surprise. Stella couldn't figure out why something that looked so nasty tasted so perfect, and even Princess Layla was thinking the exact same thing. Princess Leela spotted carrots floating in the soup, grimaced because she swore they were bitter. But when she took a bite of those exact carrots, the flavor hit her in the best way, and she couldn't believe how good they were. He told everyone, "That weird taste? It's all thanks to alkali removal." And then he added that Kamado Ash does the heavy lifting by wiping out every trace of bitterness. For the first time, the girls finally heard of that ash, and when they realized what it could do, shock hit them like a punch. After he showed him how to crush bitterness, the man handed Naomi a plain carrot and said, "Try it." And the maid took a bite and immediately recoiled from that nasty bitter sting. After the demo, Sho dunked the carrot in water, then slathered it with lyrite as magic kicked in to turbocharge the reaction. Naomi plucked a carrot from the water-soaked plate, tasted it, and froze, shocked that all she got was that sweet, gentle flavor. The usual bite and bitterness were gone like magic, leaving even the maid convinced something enchanted it. But the man shut that down fast, insisting he only used magic to turbocharge the reaction, because even without it, you can just brine the carrots overnight. Stella couldn't stop wondering what was going on. She didn't even realize the meadow had been wiped from the map. Then the elf girl rose from the table, turned to the boy, and thanked him for the amazing food. Now that Stella finally quenched her hunger, she had one more craving to chase an elf, moved in fast, and caught the boy off guard, making him blush with pure embarrassment. Nemu spotted them and lit up with interest, her cat ears practically twitching with excitement. And if Stella can pull it off on the show, then she's doing it too. With that, Nemu lunged and jumped straight on the guy. The show totally blew them away on the bed. Stella and Nemo were sprawled on top of that guy now, and the elf leaned in to tell me she'd been doing threesomes like this for ages, loving it most when a beast man was part of the mix. But still, nothing happened. Rubia gripped her magic staff and stared at the boy with bleak fury, and the moment he panicked, he bolted from the girls, only for his hand to get yanked. It was Princess Leela. She strode up, wrapped her arms around the boy, and leaned in, asking him, sweetly, for a treat after dinner. For a moment, Shu went silent, and then his cheeks flared red with pure embarrassment. Then the boy snapped back into reality, still clueless about what the girl meant, while Princess Leela erupted, because she was talking about that black sweet dish, and Shu finally understood it was chocolate. But the worst part? He was out of it. Princess Leela would never forget that first hit of chocolate. She still craved the sweetness in her memories. Then the boy called out to her, asking if she could spare some sugar. The girl snapped at his question. Sugar was pricey, and if she grabbed it for herself, everyone would call her wasteful. Princess Leela refused to turn into one of those greedy aristocrats, so rage surged through her. She shoved the boy away and barked that she had duties, then her heartbreaking cry echoed right after. The princess faked tears like a master act, because if they hadn't sold off all those new things, this mess might never have started. Stella and Numi snapped at the boy for making the princess cry. Rubia just sat there, saying nothing, while Shu's embarrassment hit like a punch to the face. Suddenly, Princess Layla wiped away her tears, stared at the man, and ordered him to come up with a plan, forcing Shu to swallow his reluctance and do exactly what she said. With that cheeky smile, the girl remembered his promise he'd deal with this mess himself, and now Shu has no way out, because he swore it to her. And once words are spoken in front of royalty, they can't be taken back. After a while, everyone scattered, and by evening the boy sat alone in the house, staring at everything in silence. Shu was still baffled by the chocolate fiasco, clueless about how to fix it, until the boy realized he could swap the sweetness out with syrup. People called it malt sugar from barley back then. They used it to brew drinks, and the moment barley starts sprouting, a special enzyme kicks in and turns starch straight into sweet sugar. Even if the show swaps chocolate for syrup, you already know Princess Lila is going to come back for the real thing and demand it from him again. In this world, nobody had cocoa. Show didn't even know the word, so he paced and thought hard, trying to figure out whether any substitute for cocoa even existed. Then it hit him. He'd once read that a roasted giant spider tastes like chocolate in South America, where people actually treat it like a prized delicacy. So yeah, this was about to be delicious. Shu remembered it all, the spider bite by the waterfall, the moment he almost quit on the spot. So yeah, the guy was terrified Shu might use that same spider against him. After a while, the boy burst into the master's office, called out for Rubia, and found her hunched over a magical scroll. Then he grilled her about the spider, asking if it lived near the waterfall, and Rubia nodded and said, "Yes, it lives near the waterfall." And Rubia nodded and said, "Yes, it lives near the waterfall. That spider's on the hunt for animals that crowd by the water, so you'll often spot it near reservoirs, showing how close it sticks to its targets," while Ruby eyed the guy with sharp suspicion, desperate to know what he was plotting this time. The show grinned at his mentor and blurted that he wanted to eat a spider, and the sorceress stared at her student Fazian in pure disbelief. She pressed him again and again, but he just kept insisting, "I'm eating the spider." The girl went ghost pale and clamped a hand over her mouth, frozen in shock for a split second. Then she blurted, "Wait, do you even know what that spider is called?" The girl stared back at him, looking totally lost, and refused to speak. but it was still her who pushed the boy to bite the spider, then snapped a warning. The poison was in its head and chest. The boy charged deep into the forest, chasing the spider that dared to go after him. At that exact moment, Sho was frantically hunting for a spider like he couldn't breathe until he found it. In the beginning, he was the hero who got flattened by a slime, but now magic had entered the show, and he felt unstoppable, so he went hunting for a spider just to mess around, and right then, Russell burst out of the bushes. Right in front of the guy, a spider dropped into view matching the one from the waterfall, except this thing was so massive it was basically a crab in disguise. Sho shot a tired glance at the spider that had crawled in because the one that bit him was tiny compared to him. We can break him in seconds, just crank the magic up and roast him. But the guy clung to what he knew about crabs how. Once they're crushed, they stink up a whole room, and the Sho can't stand that smell. So yeah, this spider screamed crab to him. And even an urban legend swore it was the same thing. So the man didn't even try to warm the spider. He just sealed its fate by freezing it solid. With magic, he wiped out the spider in seconds. Then Sho froze it solid so it couldn't move, grabbed the trapped thing with a grin, and tossed it into a bag. After a bit, the guy finally made it back home. In the forest, Shaw snatched 3 huge spiders, dumped them out of his bag, and lassoed their legs together with a rope. Then, with a flick of magic, he heated them up fast. As the spider's shell heated up, its chestnut color snapped into a vivid purple, yet the boy felt zero hunger. Just one unsettling thought. The spider was already ready to be eaten. Then Shaw split the spider up, scooped out the poisonous pieces, and stashed them in separate bowls, because that venom was paralyzing, and he figured it could knock people out as an anesthetic. The dark-haired boy hacked away the spider's poisonous bits, then tore into the limbs, prying them open to reveal meat like king crab. And even though Shaw was convinced it wasn't poisoned, he still eyed every bite with shaky caution. The boy stumbled, bit his own flesh, and the moment he tasted it, his eyes lit up. This was way better than crab meat, and Shaw immediately started craving crab fried rice. The boy finally calmed down. He wasn't doing all this just for that crabby meat. Then the Sho went and sampled the liquid from the spider's belly, and straight up it hit bitter, like coffee. After a bit, the boy came rushing back into his master's office, told Rubia the chocolate was finally ready, and then pushed a bowl of sweets into her hands. She stared at them like they looked way better than Coco's chocolate. She gasped in horror as she saw he actually made it out of a spider, her eyes popping wide with shock while the boy cheered and reached for the chocolate. The girl screamed at him to stop, because she could not bear to watch him eat that spider chocolate. The Sho scowled at the girl for that scream. But Rubia snapped back this chocolate couldn't turn nasty just because it was made with a spider, because she was a real scientist and needed to check every last detail. Rubia's face burned with shame at what he said so. She grabbed the chocolate, hesitated, then forced it to her lips and gulped it down fast, and the second it hit, pure pleasure lit up her expression. The chocolate was insanely delicious. That chocolate hit way better than before. Rubia's eyes went wide as she demanded, "How'd you do it?" Sho grinned and said he began by using liquid scraped from a spider's belly, and the witch immediately shrieked in pure terror. Then Shaw poured in the malt syrup, warmed the whole thing just enough to make the aroma explode, and when it still wasn't strong enough, he tossed in milk fat to kick up the richness. Loaded with fresh ingredients, tons of cream and butter, this chocolate absolutely crushed the last store-bought. Then the guy snapped to it. Rubia wasn't even hearing his explanations, because she was too busy devouring the chocolate. Storming out of the master's office, the boy warned her he still didn't trust the safety of that product. So don't go munching chocolate. Then, Sho turned and hurried straight to the princess, ready to spill everything about how the chocolate was being prepared. Soon, the boy shoved open the doors and found himself in the throne room, then hurried to Leela to say he'd prepared chocolate. Leela's eyes lit up with praise as Nate, chocolate, stepped in and handed her the sweet treat. The princess begged to know the ingredients after Sho said they were almost impossible to track down, and when he swore he found a substitute, he yanked out a spider like it was the answer. Leela nearly blacked out from sheer terror, but the maids lunged in and caught her before she hit the floor. Then the boy finally got the spider's name, and the furious princess demanded to know why it was purple. Even back then, it wasn't weird at all to brew medicines from monster and animal flesh, but the princess froze in place. Rumini's moved in to arrest you, and the maid stepped forward, daring to be the first to taste that chocolate. Rumini's took one bite, and her face lit up. The flavor was pure sweet bliss, thick and rich, and she couldn't stop. Leela saw her happiness and immediately jumped in, craving a taste too. Suddenly, something hit Rumini like a shockwave. Her face drained of color. She clapped her hand over her mouth, and the whole labyrinth erupted in fear at that terrifying change. The boy scooped up Ruminis right as she crumpled to the ground, and panic swept through everyone. Could the maid be okay? Ruminis leaned into him with that dangerous, seductive grace and told him to just call her Rumi. Then Sho froze, cheeks burning, staring at her in pure shock. Breathing hard and blushing, she crawled on her knees and called out to Sean with a voice dripping in seduction. Perifingayu. He bolted out of the throne room to his master, ditching the girls behind, and prayed that if the chocolate was laced with poison, Master Rubio could burn it away with magic. Soon, the boy stumbled into the girl's office and yelled for the master in panic only to find her already crumpled on the floor. She was gasping like Ruminesis, staring at the boy with a sultry look that made him feel the heat, thanks to the chocolate effect. Her entire body blushed with irresistible allure. The second show spotted the witch. His nose started pouring blood, and even while the girl gasped for breath, she still couldn't wrap her head around the fact he'd forced her to eat it. But her scream tore through the castle, and she shouted that he was a fool. Then after a bit, the man found himself back in the throne room stunned. The chocolate he'd made hit with an insane force. So strong even the master couldn't resist it. And that clear cheek mark proved it. Princess Leela beamed and immediately demanded mass production of the chocolate, but the boy went wide-eyed, stunned by what she said, and he couldn't shake the feeling it was dangerous. With chocolate in the picture, people would shell out a fortune for it. No questions, no mercy, especially if there was no antidote, and the princess knew it for a fact. After a while in the craftsman's workshop, Russell grinned and dug into the spider they had prepared. The guy had been watching spiders since he was a kid, and he couldn't believe he'd skipped out on a dish this delicious for years. Then the man lit up, praising the boy's genius for turning a spider into food and calling it the mark of a real master. Now that they know how to make chocolate, next, they've got to gear up for mass production. The man looked at the boy and said, "Lately, it feels like we're standing right on the edge of something huge, and I swear, this is the turning point." Out of nowhere, a ladder materialized in an empty field, and the man couldn't tell if it would lift him to heaven or drag him straight to hell. The craftsman studied the man's words, and his gut said the heart of the world wasn't just anywhere. It was in far Taklung. With no other invention like theirs, Sho finally felt the praise land, but then reality hit, and they still had to fight through a ton of brutal difficulties. Russell didn't get what troubles the man was talking about. Then, Sho snapped it into focus. Their biggest problem was fuel, because without it, they couldn't build the invention or ship it across the world, and all they had was firewood and coal. Getting top-tier coal for iron production was a nightmare. Then the city's population kept exploding, and fuel shortages started closing in fast. The forests of Farland are stacked with firewood, but chopping down trees won't fix the real problem. If they chop down the forest, it wouldn't bounce back for hundreds of years. On top of that, the land could turn to desert, and that's how the show's cities slowly drowned in sand. The boy also heard this back when Princess Leela was little. That forest used to be huge, but now it had shrunk dramatically. Trees got chopped for fuel, and since Farlane didn't even get that cold in winter, nobody bothered using them for heating. The villagers hauled firewood from the forest for daily cooking in the bath, fired up the forge with charcoal, and everything they needed came straight out of those trees. If the city keeps growing, the population will balloon and the demand for firewood and charcoal will skyrocket even harder. It'd be nice if this world had coal or oil, but nobody has ever even heard of them. So the craftsman decided cutting down trees was fine, just a forest doing its thing, and Sho absolutely refused to go along with that. Rich lands, endless fields, clean water, and even rain all start with one thing: forests. They're like massive living reservoirs, soaking up and holding water so people can tap into it when they need it. If you chase quick cash, you'll wreck your own country. Then Shaw drops those brutal words, and even the men are stunned, while the dark-haired boy sits there, staring at the future like it's about to explode. After what felt like forever, Shaw scrambled up to the tower's peak, staring at Farley's view in solitude. Then the quiet finally soothed him, as he slicked his phone out of his inner jacket pocket. He gripped the phone tight because the guy wanted to snap a pic of the gorgeous view of Farlane, and he just knew it would all work out until the phone died in his hands. Then it hit him. Coal, oil, electricity. Without them, everything dies. So he snapped into action and suddenly blurted out a wild idea: create something magical that could power the show. The next day, the boy grinned, clapped his hands, and blurted out an idea, then rushed to test it at the show, casting his magic with unstoppable excitement, because once he gets a thought, he simply can't resist trying it. At that exact moment, Sho was slamming a spell to dry up the stream right beside the workshop. A wind turbine's artificial airflow blasted through the air, and at first he dreamed of planting a garden, but he realized it would drop the air pressure. In a steaming haze, he raised his hands to cast a spell that would drop the pressure because the magic flow was already whipping the air into motion. Soon, the sky turned grim and lightning cracked open the clouds, and the boy was grinning until reality hit, and he yanked the spell back in control. The show had gotten way too wild, and it could have turned dangerous fast. After a moment, the boy slammed an iron rod into the ground, then froze, realizing he should have been way more careful. Right then, inside the show house, he cast magic again, and the sky erupted with clouds and lightning. Lightning tore across the sky, straight for the iron rod. Then the show finally called in a magic lightning strike with help from one of their members. They figured out the trick: build a huge wall of clouds and you can charge it in about a minute. With the magic working within a roughly 100-meter radius after that, he hit his limit. Then Shaw closed in on the impact site, and the closer he got, the stronger that nasty ozone stench hit, screaming that something dangerous was about to go wrong. If the current is strong, they can totally ride it, so when they carve out a narrow T-shaped gap and blast a powerful flow through it, it becomes very doable. As the man hammered a T-shaped pole, Ramirez stormed right up. Then Sho spotted a girl standing in the doorway of his house. The maid told him that Nemo heard thunder and got terrified, so she rushed over to check things out. The boy finally snapped. He knew it was his fault, and he confessed to her that he'd been tinkering with magic. Then the boy and the girl slipped outside. This was his final experiment, and Ramirez's worry was crushing him. But Sho just grinned and said he'd trigger it so lightning would slam the iron rods and melt them. After the explanation, Shaw snapped his spell, lightning, and the magic flew out without a single word. But that stunning girl was staring, and after being the kind of admirer who loved the flamboyant, Shaw couldn't just stand there. So he summoned lightning. Suddenly, Ramirez shrieked in terror and clapped her hands over her ears, totally stunned. The boy, moving up to the iron bars, realized he'd actually done it, because once he could control lightning, he could melt anything he wanted, anytime. A brutal hailstorm slammed down out of nowhere, and Leela Furious snapped that the boy must not summon lightning inside the castle, because Shaw could wipe it out in an instant, so the kid was ordered to stop experimenting with lightning there. The show was devastated that he couldn't crank out the magical experiment fast enough, and that's why the master vanished off to live in the forest. He had experiments itching to happen, so he had to get everything ready this time. The show crafted a plate with a hole that would slowly shrink over time. The kid slid a copper rod hammered in the smithy into the plate right through the hole. Because copper is soft and bends easily, he could keep shrinking the wire's diameter by simply pulling it through, over and over. Sho refused to believe a hand could craft a thin, twisted wire like that, but yep, it happened, and it was enough to prove him wrong. He burned the wire to make it pliable, but he didn't just light it, he used magic. The real issue was the insulation. The thing meant to stop short circuits, but in a world where vinyl ruled everything, he couldn't find a single sheet, so he wrapped the record in paper slathered with a mix of nakava and oil. I heard paper wrapping is way better than vinyl, but I didn't know if that rumor was actually true. He wrapped thin leather around the forged rod, then cranked copper wire over it until he finally got his hands on the real deal. Those extra moves might have mattered a lot, but still, this was all just an experiment. The very next day, he finally caught up with Numi cowering behind a column, and she trembled as she asked him, voice shaking, if the thunder was coming. Shaw snapped the girl with "I'm fine," but the princess shut down his experiments inside the castle, so he slipped into the forest. Numi got it, and with a shy voice, she warned him. Sure, Shaw was kind, but that girl still feared him. The boy asked the girl if the maid only cared for the princess or if she also kept her safe, and the girl nodded right away. The man fired off an example of what she'd do if lightning struck. And suddenly, Numi's job turned deadly. She'd have to race through a lightning attack and deliver a crucial message while the bandits blasted lightning magic. If that girl panics and bolts, she's out of a job. Numa was furious about it, and she hated that rule with a burning passion. The girl had no clue what to do. Then the show told her to start by watching lightning magic experiments. And Numi quietly, shilly nodded along. They had to grab a roomy spot ideally with a river nearby, while Nim tried to catch up, shouting at the showmaster because she just couldn't keep pace. But the guy bragged that magic made him lightning quick, casting a spell on himself to shed the weight. Nim was the only one who could pull off that kind of speed without a hint of magic, and the beastmen were downright jaw-dropping. They had to lash the spool to a wooden post, then hoist one end of the copper wire and jam the other into the ground to choke the speed, and the show right away warned the girl, "Don't you dare look up." Unlike real magic, you can aim and fire. This one copies nature itself, so it slips its leash, twists unpredictably, and honestly, you never know where it's going to slam into you. If they aren't careful, that magic could slam straight into them, so they have to back off. Then lightning magic finally crackled into the sky, and the boys blurted, "It's starting." Lightning slammed straight into the ready-made coil, and Nim blared like a thunderclap. The show practically erupted in joy because their plan actually worked, and it felt like lightning cracked at the very edge of reality. Their homemade coils suddenly burst into flames, and Noom spotted it right away. Too, while Nim blurted out, voice shaking, that the coil was burning, frantically trying to prove to the show host he'd seen it too. The master bolted the moment he realized this place was a death trap. If flames ever caught here, it would be pure ruin, because in this world there was no way to put out a fire, and the entire kingdom would burn down to nothing. Show spotted flames creeping into the underbrush, froze for a split second, and launched cold magic only to watch it barely slow the fire, so he snapped into action, hunting for something that could actually put it out. Suddenly, he blurted out a plan. Build a vacuum and choke the whole area of oxygen. The flame died out, but smoke curled up like a warning. Shao gulped, then exhaled and snapped. "We almost cooked the whole forest." Nim let out a sad breath and admitted she still feared thunderstorms, and the master spun around like it was nothing at all, telling her she'd get used to them soon. Even with the flames put out, the boy still had no clue whether their experiment actually worked. He yanked his blade from its sheath, stared at the metal wrapped on the spool, flicked his eyes to his sword, and then shoved that metal straight into the blade. The master grinned and said he nailed it. Turns out the bit that slipped off the spool turned into a magnet and snapped straight onto the sword steel piece. But this magnet was pathetic, more like a tiny little magnet you'd find in a kit, and it drained fast, losing its pull in no time. He realized you can't forge a real permanent magnet out of steel, and honestly, that was a brutal letdown. Sho sank into thought and suddenly realized he could make magnets. Now while Nim hovered behind him, praying he'd be okay, convinced it was all pointless anyway. The master spun around, burst into laughter, and told them, "Everything's fine. Every failure just drags you closer to success." Even though the magnets failed, Sho saw it magic could do the heavy lifting, and depending on how you mix it, you can pull off way more than you'd expect, which honestly felt like a win. And yeah, it's nowhere near as badass as the magic that has to be spoken, but don't sleep on it, especially at the start. The girl told the boy, "We burned everything, so let's head back to the castle and grab lunch." They strolled side by side toward the castle, grinning because food was right around the corner, and once they were near the shops, they drifted between stalls. Then the woman shoved the show into Pico's hands, and he shot her a huge thank you. In this world, there's a simple compass, and he's convinced some natural stone is buried here somewhere, but even with the queen's money, prying it free is going to be brutally hard. If Sho could get his hands on cobalt or neodymium, he'd forge a magnet that hits like a truck, but he had no clue where to find them or how to purify them. And then there were those wild iron and platinum alloys too. Back in the past world, I dug into it and found that platinum alloys were powering high-end audio equipment with strong magnets long before neodymium magnets ever showed up. The boy fixated on platinum and realized in their world there's only gold, silver, and copper. Sho had never even heard the name platinum. Ed had no clue it existed at all. So if he's got magnets and coils, he can build a motor, then crank that into a generator. And once that's hooked up, he can fire up arc welding right now, which beats lightning welding. He's been counting down because controlled welding lets him move and build on a whole new level. And Sho couldn't wait 1 second more. Suddenly, screams erupted from the alley. Someone demanded that they back away from him. Then Shaw panicked, not knowing what the noise meant, and even assumed it was some kind of brawl. 3 men and a girl stood crammed in the alley. Then they barked threats at her like it was the end, loudly declaring she was finished. The girl snapped into motion, drawing her sword with irritated impatience, and just from the way she looked, two pigtails bouncing and gloves locked on her hands, Sho knew one thing for sure. She was Her Majesty's bodyguard. 3 men went after the girl with ugly insults, and Shaw just couldn't wrap his head around how they could do something like that to her. One of the hooligans snapped that if she'd just stayed silent, nobody would have gotten hurt. Then Sho stared at Mizuki, or maybe at her bodyguard, because that poor guy looked completely lost. In the rain, the man in the raincoat tried to make the girl vanish. Then he insulted her and sneered that she was just a royal servant. She said nothing, gripping the sword's hilt with iron-tight resolve. A few weeks back, the queen took the mic, introduced Mizuki like the genius behind brand-new carriages, and Mizuki even crossed paths with a traveler. Then she spilled how it felt to ride those carriages while traveling. The girl lit up and called it wonderful because even though carriage rides usually knock her out with exhaustion, this one was so comfy she could slip into sleep without a second thought. Mizuki was convinced everyone would want one, and then Sho hit her with bad news. Carriage has a catch. It bounces right over the exact same bumps every single time. He wanted wheels made of something softer, but nothing matched what he needed, because his dream was a carriage that wouldn't need a horse at all, and the queen couldn't believe it when he tried to build one without it. Her Majesty burst into laughter and praised it as the real mark of a master, then said that if they could craft a model like this, they could sell it and rake in profits. Shaw just awkwardly nodded along. Mizuki stopped for a beat, then stared at Her Majesty and the host, because the moment she saw it, it was clear they were vibing like they'd known each other forever. The queen let out a victorious laugh and snapped that she was right because he was her top leading specialist. She went for it and reached out to Ms. Mizuki, since they both had work to sort out, and he figured she'd want to spill what she thought about the trip. And she didn't hesitate. She agreed. They marched down a mile-long corridor, and the boy suddenly clocked it. She was royalty from a legendary empire, her origins dripping in ornate cameos, and the girl wasted no time admitting it, launching straight into her tale. The Great Cameo Empire is a massive state sitting to the east of that faraway strip, so if that strip is the west, then yep, the empire's stuck on the east side. Shaw couldn't even grasp why he'd fled his country. Mizuki was totally lost and started hunting for a way to make sense of it. And then the boy finally realized what he'd done. He rushed to apologize, because it was downright rude to say all that right after they'd just met. Mizuki told him not to worry, insisting they'd met before, and she even revealed she'd come with Her Majesty all the way to Rubia, so Sho was left completely stunned. He squirmed with embarrassment, cheeks blazing, then hesitated and turned to Mrs. Mizuki, praying she wouldn't mind as he peeked at the sword on her belt, because that blade was in the strangest shape, and he just couldn't stop himself from being curious. Mizuki told him, "Sure, I'll take a look, but don't act like it's some wholly untouchable sword or anything." And now this sword collided blade to blade with another, and Shaw gaped in shock. The girl overpowered the attacker. He clung on with his last ounce of strength, while the boy just stood there, staring, mouth still hanging open. But he pushed himself to figure out how to save her, because even Mizuki's insane skill couldn't let her take on 3 people at once, and then the blade flashed in a blink. The girl gasped and stared in shock. Then, because she'd clearly been hurt, fresh drops of blood started staining the stone slabs of the road. The show couldn't stand it anymore, blurted the girl's name, and warned her she was seconds away from getting attacked from behind. A glowing ball snapped into the boy's hand, started spinning like a weapon, and blasted 3 men with blinding light, so they scrambled to shield their eyes and cover their hiding spots. Rage burned in Shu's face as a blazing light spilled off him. Then Mizuki finally clocked him, and the men did too, because they remembered he was a scholar. One of the bearded men roared that they had to run, and Sho and Mizuki just stood there, silent, watching as the others bolted away. The boy was soaked in cold sweat. He pulled off that trick by compressing air with magic, but once real combat hit, he knew he'd be crushed and couldn't possibly hold his ground. After getting swallowed by his own thoughts, he snapped back fast, slid right beside Mrs. Mizuka, and checked on her the second he knew she wasn't okay. The girl's shoulder was wrecked, and she clutched it tight to stop the blood, yelling that she was bleeding. While he finally snapped into action, he had to stop it right now. They slumped against the wall as Shaw ripped into first aid, wrapping her wound tight and tucking a twig under the dressing to hold it in place. The boy scooped up Mizuki and yelled that they had to race back to the castle because the master was 100% going to have healing spells. They'd already hauled themselves to the master's house, and Mizuki was sprawled on the mattress, sick as a dog. Yet the doctor just refused to treat her. Sho couldn't figure out why, so he immediately begged Stella because the master was out gathering plants, and she was the only one he had left to turn to. And when Truddy snapped, she insisted, "I'm not working as a doctor here." He had no clue how to win Stella over, so he begged her to help Mizuki in any way she could, because if they sat still, Stella would vanish. The show practically begged her, choking on tears, and Stella just stared. Then she finally spoke. "Fine, but you have to agree to stay the night with me, and only then will I think about it." He nodded, promising he'd do it anything she wanted. And Stella couldn't shake the feeling that he truly thought forced consent would play right into her, because she was fueled by feminine pride too. The show started apologizing like it meant every word, ready for whatever came next. Then Stella grinned and rushed over to the injured Mizuki, kneeling beside her as the healer launched into a chant, working a spell to bring the girl back. Mizuki's wound snapped shut on the spot, and within moments, it was totally gone. Then, the moment the girl woke up, she rushed to Lady Stella and apologized for the mess she caused, saying the bleeding had stopped, but if she moved, it would start right back up. As Stella stormed off, she didn't care what happened to the Empire's people, and that crushed Mizuki. She panicked and tried to call the girl back, but Shu just couldn't grasp why she hated them so fiercely, or whether she had a real reason. She prayed she'd be okay, then nodded, thanked him with shaking relief, and accepted the fact that he just saved her life. The boy insisted he hadn't done anything at all yet. If she ever got stuck, he'd always be there to help. Mizuki stayed quiet for a beat, then finally said, "You're a good person." Shode scrubbed the apple clean, then froze because he was finally seeing Stella's healing magic for the first time. The moment she started chanting the spell, the wound snapped shut and healed on the spot. He was so lost in confusion that he didn't even realize he was cleaning the apple. Then snap, he cut his finger, blurted out a shout, and instantly wondered if his magic could seal the wound. Sho pressed his finger to his small cut and stared at it, thinking, so that's the truth. Our bodies run on chemical reactions, which meant they could use magic to speed those reactions up, or even growth magic like people used on plants. Monsters don't strike often, but in every world, the hardest battle is bringing people back. Even when every scoundrel on the street could jump him, Sho still decided he'd learn the bare-bones attack and healing spells so he could finally stand his ground and protect himself. The boy yanked his finger from his mouth, dragged the knife closer to his own body, and sliced it over his wound all over again. Then fresh blood splashed down, dripping onto the table where he'd just scrubbed the apples clean. From the outside, he might look unhinged, but maybe the spirit of true science is steering him, because at the heart of it all, it's magic that kicks growth into gear, blasting his skin into action to seal the wound. The boy stared at his finger, and rage hit him because he realized this way wouldn't work at all. The cut had gone deeper, and blood was pouring out fast. Next, he shoved magic into the mix to crank up his reaction speed, convinced skin healing was just chemical reactions in action. But that answer blew up too, proving healing wasn't as simple as he hoped. Then he triggered double activation, pushing growth and sharpening his reactions at the same time, and the wound finally started knitting itself back together, just a bit. Double activating his magic isn't just hard, it demands razor concentration, like juggling multiple conversations in his head at once while tracking every single topic. No matter how hard he fought, blood kept spilling from that wound, driving him nuts. So he slammed more magic, and strain hit him so hard, sweat drenched his face. At last, his wound sealed up for good, only a tiny scar remained, plus a single drop of blood from where it had been. Wide and raging, and Xiao burst out, loud and proud, that he'd finally done it. He leaned back and let out a loud exhale, so locked in on what he was doing that he'd totally forgotten to breathe, but he still forced himself to take that next breath. This show can only run on the magic he pulls from his own mind, so if he keeps sorting everything out, his powers will explode and grow way bigger. If you think about it, spells are basically like a program that kicks on a bunch of effects and then meshes them together, so when the regeneration suddenly cut out, he had no idea why it stopped. Say you cast magic on Meat Boom, it won't flip back into a cow, it won't multiply, it won't turn into fertilizer, and it sure won't rot. Magic can only stitch up wounds, but it cheats first, snatching life force ahead of time to turbocharge the healing. The show swore the flesh couldn't regrow no life force to steal. No miracle coming while he stared at the meat fresh off the fire. And that's why when the heart stops, blood just dies out, oxygen never shows up, and once the cell's fuel runs dry, it can't bounce back. Animals can't bounce back fast. But plants? Oh, they're stubborn. Cut them into little pieces and they'll keep growing. And even a forgotten fruit in the fridge can sprout into brand new vegetables. The boy finished the steak and then caught something wild. Some plants get cloned on purpose to keep their quality perfect. Out of nowhere, he shot up from his chair, slammed his hands on the table, then stormed into his greenhouse to check on his flowers. One flower totally grabbed him, and it turned out to be a vanilla orchid. The show got seedlings straight from the master, and he planted them until vanilla beans sprouted. Then he heard orchids could be cloned too, and the moment he imagined magically forcing wild tissue regeneration, his mind raced to the same miracle. Cloning orchids. The boy realized there was no other choice, so he steeled himself and tried. Then he grabbed a sheet of paper and sliced it into tiny pieces. Snip a leaf, drop it into a sterile cup of water, kick the magic on, and watch the leaf cells explode into more life. Then line the leaves up at perfectly equal distances. So later, those overgrown tissues can transform into a blinding white mass. Fresh sprouts burst out of the leaf. Then, out of nowhere, a huge new leaf unfurled, and the boy shouted in pure joy that he was finally back to normal. With that, he could clone and turn out every valuable plant he wanted, stack up vanilla beans by the bucket, and then, like a full-on evil genius, he burst into loud, cackling laughter. He kept roaring with laughter until it finally broke him. He collapsed right there, passed out, and it looked like he pushed his magic way too far. After a while, he was finally back inside his house, locked in on the details. Then someone called out, and it was her. He spun around, stunned, because he never expected to see her. She caught the moment he was doing something incredible again, and when he glanced at her, he shrugged like he was only thinking up silly little nonsense. And in that moment, he couldn't shake the feeling something amazing just happened. Nim spun back to Mr. Shaw, begging him to come to Onion Coupon, yet he just couldn't wrap his head around what kind of coupon that even was. The girl said it was pure, fluffy, happy vibes, like the air itself smelled amazing. Sean and Nim strolled down a tiny street in their city, and the whole place felt oddly empty, like they were the only two people left alive. The boy turned back to her, chasing her words like they held the key, trying to figure out what she meant. Then he couldn't ignore it. It was fluffy, and it smelled absolutely delicious. Nim told him her mom had opened a shop, and the guy blinked in shock. Then he leaned in and asked about her again. They marched up to the house, and Nim pointed straight ahead. The place is right here at Cognan Coupon, the Beast Diner. The doorbell blared as fresh visitors rolled in, and inside the cafe was packed. Everyone was laughing, chatting up a storm, and sipping their drinks. Nim blurted that every visitor was a beast person and begged it wouldn't turn into a disaster, since Show wasn't one. Then the girl spun toward Mr. Show and cheered that they were all thrilled to see him. Nim's mother, Nina, practically lit up the moment she saw him, gushing that she was so happy because everything she'd ever heard about him had been poured out by him. And that's exactly why she'd always pictured him as a truly outstanding scientist. She blurted out that she was his mother, and the boy stepped forward, introduced himself as Show, then admitted that right now he was only the master's student because he didn't have a certificate yet. The boy heard that only the Imperial University could grant an official certificate to a true master. But he didn't care because whatever he did wouldn't change just because someone stamped it. In the diner, everyone suddenly clocked that a real master had shown up right beside them, and the guy just stood there hearing the excited chatter, completely lost on why they were teasing him like that. Nini brought out a steaming plate and told him it was their signature dish, meatball soup. The boy snatched a spoon on the spot, declared it insanely tasty, and swore the broth was pure magic. The girl explained that the fish never gets taken out, the broth is stewed with it. Then spices hit the pot to crush the smell and leave the meat tasting rich. Nim told her mom about the soup the show chef had made for them, and when he realized it meant they'd customized it to the animal's tastes, she just burst out laughing because that soup was insanely tasty. A stranger tapped the boy's shoulder and called out to Mr. Shaw, and suddenly a whole swarm of cat girls swarmed the scene, leaving him utterly frozen, clueless about what was happening. The show started acting like they were just like him. One of the girls said it straight, and another girl even admitted she wanted to get closer to the host. That made him wonder if they weren't truly indifferent to scientists. But deep down, he knew it wasn't that simple. The blonde cat blurted that the city's buzzing with rumors. The show's host is a demon, and the guy just couldn't wrap his head around how that rumor started. Then the girls leaned in and swore he's a real master who even invented spider chocolate. The show scrambled to pull back the chocolate tainted with a spider, because after one nasty incident, it somehow started getting produced again. Then they slipped it into secret sales to us as a tonic and nutrition supplement during and after illness. But the merchant let slip. There were other kinds of tricks like this one. Trust me, it works on someone else too, and when it does, every girl is suddenly yours. With that filthy ad plastered everywhere, you'd think everyone's hype, and sure enough, the reviews sound wild. Even the cat girl claims Nim told her the show host was a total sweetheart. The showmaster also invented a pump, swears by it every single day, and now her life is way easier. He said he was happy to hear that because back when he worked for his master, hauling water from the well was brutally hard. The girl kept saying the same thing, but she still had no clue why water comes out of the pump, and when another person backed her up, they both called it straight up strange. And the girl took a deep breath and messaged the show host, begging to know if he'd pull off another mind-blowing stunt again. Nim cut in mid-conversation and blurted that the show's host was secretly building a horse-free carriage and ultra-hidden project nobody's supposed to know about yet. But the girls couldn't wrap their heads around it. How could that carriage roll without a horse? They immediately figured it had to be magic. The boys snapped, "No way, that isn't magic at all. It's just logic." And even though the girl froze in surprise, he instantly doubled down to make it crystal clear. He decided to prove his point and straight up said that during the show, he built one toy only the cat girls had no clue what it was. Yet the show insisted he demonstrate it. It's a toy car with a wheel that bounces like it's alive, and that heavy spinning wheel soaks up kinetic energy, so the moment you let go, it won't stop. It just keeps rolling. This machine soaks up power in its hands, but it's not really hands at all. It's a motor in there somewhere, and instead of 4 wheels, it's got just 2, so I couldn't wait to see how it would move. Then he fired it up right there on the floor. He yanked his hand free and told them, "See? It moves just like this." Then his invention skated across the floor and boom, it instantly snatched the girls' attention. The cat girls bolted straight for the typewriter, and the boy froze in total shock. Then they tore the room apart, darting under the tables, because they weren't just curious. They were hunting the machine like it was the one thing they had to catch. The show was aimed at the girls because he needed them to finally calm down, and then Nina slipped into the hallway since she had no clue what was going on. The cat awkwardly perched for a second, then blurted that their bodies move on their own, and Nini snapped back. That's exactly why they don't work. Show just stared, totally lost about what she meant. She warned them, "Stop jumping, people do that, and you'll never do your job. And if you're on alert and a rat suddenly shows up to snag your attention, you're the ones who are getting hit." The show cut in and told me, "Quick reminder, Nim didn't attack you. She only wagged her tail a little." Nina bragged that it was all because of her training, and she was damn proud of it. Then they followed him through the shops, and Shaw started hinting he might grab some spices too. They closed in on the shopkeeper, and Shaw bragged that the selection was weirdly good when the shopkeeper finally swung his attention to the customer. I figured he was the real deal, so I grilled him to be sure, and he even told me he had rare ores. Then he shoved a stone into his hands and swore it looked plain for a reason, because Shaw knew it was the real key all along. But it's exactly how it works. If you press the ore right up against the blade, it snaps to the sword instantly. And when Shaw saw that natural magnetism, his eyes lit up, because this kind of rarity is so crazy, it's not even worth 1 gold. Then he blurted out that he was going to buy her boom, like it was nothing. The merchant nearly choked on disbelief and demanded they wait, saying he couldn't wrap his head around it. Meanwhile, Sho thought she wasn't for sale at all, because he wasn't just buying a person, he wanted her. Specifically, the seller shot me a quick apology since I figured nobody would dare pay that much. But the man cut in and said he'd swap it for something else. Scattered all around was dried slime, and the boy jabbed at it with his finger like it was the hottest discovery. Right beside it, a sign bragged it was a delicacy. From the depths, Nim's eyes went wide at the choice. But the kid was already handing over the money. The guys were already huddled at the show workshop, and Nim shot over to the showmaster because she'd bought a ton of stuff here. Then the guy unpacking the bag jerked his head up, staring at her in shock. He suddenly remembered he wanted to cook. So once everything was set, he jumped at the chance to make something to eat, and the girl happily said yes. On the table sat a bunch of gear-like parts, and when the man spun around, Nim was already sound asleep on the bed, so he just kept working. Then the guy blared, "Everything's ready," and ripped out the whipping device. No, even better, a hand mixer. It's like a toy car. Twist the handle, and you load energy into the flywheel. Then that stored momentum keeps the whisk spinning even after you let go. Nim jolted awake, totally confused about what he was even doing, and when Sho noticed she'd woken up, he told her he was whipping egg whites to make meringue plus. Meringue was a brand new word to her, and she had no idea what it meant. The girl blinked in shock as it instantly puffed up into the soft, white cloud-like treat. And the boy grinned, telling her to make it fluffy too. On the table sat rich cream, spun out by a centrifuge, and it was ready to whip up in seconds with a hand mixer. The girl marched up to the show host and demanded answers, because she couldn't wrap her head around the slime and everyone knew it could be deadly. He swore only the organs are deadly, while the clear, see-through part won't poison a soul like a jellyfish you can't stop staring at. Toss it back into hot water, then let it cool boom. It sets up just like jelly. Mix meringue with that returned slime, whip it up with cream and syrup, toss in vanilla pods, and suddenly the semi-frozen slime turns out looking like NATO Plus. They were ready to add it to crank up the flavor. Pour the mixture into a bowl, let it cool down, and boom, today's snack is ready. NATO's mousse of slime from another world. Suddenly, Stella and Rubia burst through the door, and the healer leaned in, begging Shaw to get her something sweet. The man shot back that it was almost ready, so they could grab it right now, and he swore they'd probably mistaken this spot for some kind of cafe. 3 girls dove straight into the new dish only to freeze the second they realized they had no idea what they were even eating. The cake was pure, cool, perfection, fluffy, tender, and wrapped in a crisp golden crust. Absolutely delicious. Sho said it was called mousse, and the moment he got to the main ingredient, his voice caught, and silence swallowed the room. Then he blurted out that the main ingredient was slime, and the girls froze, stunned that this secret recipe even existed, while the guy had to admit he'd never seen that slime with his own eyes in person. Stella told everyone she'd been handed this delicacy to eat, like it was some rare treasure, but it totally didn't hit, and Shaw lit up, saying he was just happy she liked it. Rubio was so stunned she just froze, couldn't even lift a finger. Stella snapped that it was a bad reaction, and sure enough, the girl looked like she wasn't breathing. Yet the mousse still sat in her spoon. Stella said Rubia's fruit opinions are way too biased, and that one weird prejudice comes from it. Then Shaw just awkwardly laughed and admitted, "Yeah, that's true." The second she spots a rare fish, a rare vegetable, or a rare dish, her mind snaps to one question: can it be eaten? But Shaw wants them to learn from the Japanese, who devour everything the world has to offer. Stella sniffed the air, utterly baffled. This wasn't slime, so she swore it had to be a vanilla pod, while the boy insisted it smelled exactly like an orchid. The girl suddenly remembered using it for fragrances, and Sho snapped around to face Mrs. Stella, pitching, "Let's turn this into perfume," and she gasped in surprise. He told them to mix the perfume with a special alcohol, pour it into a tiny bottle, and then boom, catch that scent anytime they wanted. Stella lunged straight onto him, trying to steal a kiss, but then Rubelia snapped awake and swung her attention to Shaw, shocking him. Then he turned and felt pure relief when he saw she was alive. She tried to deny it, but the truth spilled out. "Make me perfume and I'll forgive you." The very next day, the workshop erupted in screams over his performance, and someone shouted that he was absolutely terrible. The man instantly got it. She was talking about Stella's perfumes, and the way she praised them, you could tell she loved them. The evil queen nodded along, but Shaw shot back that he'd already taken care of making them for Her Highness too. She breathed in a strand of his hair, praying he'd think it was sweet, and then he nailed it, saying it smelled amazing, and calling her Your Majesty. She told him to call her Lilo, and the poor boy immediately turned red because he couldn't just use her name with everyone watching, so he puffed out his cheeks, half embarrassment and half offense. Sho finally got what she felt, because he'd been drowning in alienation, too, especially when people praised him as a master, or the true master, and once it was just them alone, he leaned in and called her Lila. He just had to make sure it fit, and before he could even finish, Layla shot back, "Yep, it's perfect." Then Sho suddenly remembered something and spun back toward her. She had zero clue what it even was, so he pushed hard to find out about those chocolates, especially whether they actually sell. The girl snapped back, "Yep, they're crazy popular. In the market, every spider chocolate bar sells for 2 gold coins, and people are whispering that big merchants, kings, and even the nobility are snatching them up fast. People don't really talk about it, but some have even vanished after gorging on those chocolates. So when the boy stammered, he quietly said he couldn't shake the feeling it wasn't normal, because Lila kept insisting there was nothing to worry about. Every last old man and every pig on the hit list was already gone, straight down to hell. And maybe this is exactly what he'd been aiming for. All along, turns out. The show awkwardly went along with it, and he never saw that kind of impact coming. Lila giggled and told him he was just cute, then she flung herself into his arms and burst out laughing. The boy saw her and thought, she looks like a sweetheart, but she still didn't shy from the grimy jobs. Her political game was unreal, and Shaw couldn't stop breaking into nervous sweat. For months, the show has thrown him into this other world, and he's finally picked up a few hard truths. The people here have been living in the same broken state for over 1,000 years. If we assume this world's civilization is stuck at the Edo level, then somehow it could rocket all the way to modern Japan in just a little over 100 years. One big reason could be magic, because that convenient magic muzzles science, and it's wild that they don't even have matches to spark a flame, let alone electricity. Those rare magical stones can soak up magic and then blaze the moment they hit. Boom. Instant light, but they cost a fortune, so most regular people who can't use magic can't afford even one candle. Sho figured he could build a basic generator with a natural magnet he just bought from a traveling merchant. But that tiny miracle still couldn't juice a phone, even though back in his world it was strong enough to light a bulb. The boy stared at the light bulb and went, "Wait, glass exists, but this world's glass is packed with impurities, so it's way too cloudy for a real bulb." That realization hit hard, and he decided he'd have to make the glass himself. They dash off to hunt down the supplies they need, because the magic ingredient for glass is quartz, and the riverbanks are packed with it. That same kind of glass so normal back in the original world will be a nightmare to recreate, because the chemicals needed to make it are brutal. He's convinced those ancient crystal glasses were saved using plain wood ash, and also let Cho read it and went, "The more lead you pack in, the sharper it comes out." He even figured the heavy detector's scintillator might be glass, and if it was lead, then it had to be sitting in the castle's materials department. Back in his house, you could practically hear the sparks from how hard he was working, while Sho sat at the table again, cranking out his glass-melting crucible, carving it straight from a bigger chunk of quartz. And now, he had to get ash. He'd need a mountain of it, then haul it into a big cauldron, melt it in magically heated water, and keep going until it's fully saturated. We've got to scoop up that liquid with the sediment, spark the reaction with magic, and grind it down into a white powder. Then we'll know it's potassium. And wow, what a potash find. Even if the name didn't matter anymore, the quartz still had to be crushed, because only then would it dissolve faster. He ditched the old pestle and mortar for grinding wheat and swapped in metal grinders so the water wheel's power could smash the grain automatically. And right then he discovered a crazy magic trick: heat quartz, cool it down, and repeat until it crumbles into tiny pieces. He'd once again been proven right. Magic could do way more than anyone expected. And the way you wield it could crank work efficiency into overdrive. Toss the quartz, the shell, and the lead right into the crucible, then slide that crucible into the furnace. The lead would melt instantly, but the quartz wouldn't budge. All glass needs a brutal amount of heat, and the forge, just like everyone feared, simply wasn't strong enough. So he pumped it full of magical heat, boosting the temperature by cranking up the molecules' vibrations until everything surged hot. Quartz starts to liquefy and burn with a fiery orange glow. Then once it melts, it gets poured straight onto a steel plate. You've got to crush and stretch it with a special magic that magically adds weight. Because this same power is the exact drawback. It can't help but bring the weight down somewhere else too. Then everything cooled. Bam, something snapped his attention, and he spotted the lead still clinging in spots, proving it hadn't fully melted. After trying again and again, it finally clicks. Only the yellowed lead melts clean, since the whole thing just won't heat right. So he keeps the heat to the first part, and they only pick the ones that have gone yellow. The show came back with another trial performance, and as the lights hit, he started pouring out the strange liquid that had formed inside the glass. The boy replayed everything that happened in his head, then a huge smile cracked across his face. He'd done it, and his glass was finally spotless. It's got a few nasty impurities, and the shape is a little rough, but it's still usable. He figured it could become window glass, or even simple dishes. Glass normally cools and locks up fast, so you've got to shape it on the spot, but with magic on your side, it can hold the perfect temperature you need. With glass everywhere, he just couldn't stop thinking about building a custom furnace and making something truly original. Then it hit him. Next, he'd need a light bulb. So he grabbed the idea and dove straight into glass blowing. To blast it open, he packed the furnace with a wicked mix of iron, bamboo, and castor oil, then jammed the glassy stuff inside, grabbed the bamboo stick, twisted it hard, and blew straight into the heart of the tube. He toiled for days, shaping glass by hand. Then the unfinished light bulb started to sag and melt, and Shaw realized the truth. This wasn't simple at all. He wrestled with the right way to blow into it, convinced it was just a question of figuring out the right moves like addition and subtraction. That kid grabbed the tube again and blew hard, trying to coax a light bulb into existence. Meanwhile, the sun was already gone for the night, and he'd been grinding on the glass for days, while Stella and Rubia just stood there totally clueless about what he was even building. Stella stared into her reflection and froze, because an elf stared back at her too. Ruby snapped her eyes toward the performance, baffled by those boards, then spotted the glasses sitting there like some invisible shield. Shaw cut around the corner, spotted Mr. and Mrs. Stella, and started explaining how he'd managed to boost the glass a little. And then he finally spilled the truth. This wasn't just any mirror, it was glass. And in it they could see themselves crystal clear. Stella went completely wide-eyed, stunned to the core because it was her staring back. Shaw said they'd made it just in time, because he was eager to talk to them about something important. The boy unfurled the rolled wire and started to say it was copper, but Rubia caught on instantly and finished the explanation for him. He nodded to confirm it, then decided to coat the whole thing with a super thin film because when he tried wrapping it in paper before, it was just way too thick. Rubia figured he could use Nakaba, because once you bend that line with her, it literally delaminates. Then Stella leaned in and said, "What if we ditch the usual stuff and try wax from insects?" Sho pushed for answers again, and Rubia finally caught on. She told him to get ready, because they were storming into the forest after that guy, and he had no clue they'd move this soon. But that man knew it for a reason, because the master was a real scientist. Ruby snapped, and they had to hurry. The insect wax felt exactly like the one from his old world, and once he dragged the copper wire through the melted goo, it coated it in a smooth, perfect film. So, with the master and Mrs. Stella's help, he finally wound up a great spool. The real problem hit the thread. He couldn't get the tungsten needed for the material, so the carbon thread was carved from finely planed bamboo, then steamed and treated until it was ready. In the very first incandescent bulbs, the ones people called Edison lamps, bamboo served as the glowing filament. Stella swore it was the vacuum's magic. The guy nodded like it was the truth, and the girl leaned in, dying to know what he was doing. The boy pointed and swore it was a lamp, and the girls stared like he'd lost his mind. Then he broke it down. That copper wire is wound into a coil, and the moment you slide a magnet into or out of it, the lamp suddenly sparks to life. He pressed the magnet to the coil, and bam, the light bulb flared to life, just like he promised. Rubio stared in shock that it really glowed, while Stella couldn't make sense of why any of this was happening. The boy broke it down. When you shove a magnet into a coil, it sparks a force like electricity, and the bulb flares to life. No magic, just science. And he even said anyone can use that same idea. If they teamed it up with a water wheel or a windmill and rigged a mechanism that runs non-stop, the lamps could blaze even brighter. Stella just dropped the bomb that there's a problem. When the darkness snaps into bright clarity, the show turns beet red and begs Mrs. Stella not to drop him into an awkward mess. And the second he tries to shake off that clingy girl, he accidentally bumps the magnets, knocking them clean off the board. A chunk of stone, shaped like a pentagon, clanged onto the tablet beside the lamp. Then Sho froze, stunned by what he'd just witnessed. The light bulb was blazing even though no magnet sat on the coil. He brought the magic stone right up to the spiral, and boom, the light bulb snapped on. Turns out the stone was sparking with electromagnetic induction, and that discovery lit a fire in him as he couldn't get enough of the other world. Rubia stared, stunned by the bulb's gorgeous glow, and Stella swore it felt like the same electric punch as a shock, while Sho grinned because he'd heard magical stones could store power and then unleash it like magic. But he never imagined that magical stone could spark electricity. That magnet has to keep sliding inside the coil non-stop, and the magic stone nearby, just sitting there quietly, summons a magnetic field out of thin air. Xiao strode up to the master, convinced the magical stones would break down from non-stop use, but the girl just stared and said she'd never even heard of it. He couldn't believe it was real, this eco-friendly, endless electricity. And if something like that existed back in his world, he'd already be holding a Nobel Prize. Shaw had already slipped into the castle and locked eyes with Leela. firing off details about the invention he'd been building, and when the queen saw him back in her kingdom, joy lit her face. She couldn't wait to hear what he'd cooked up this time. But the man's face turned stone cold. Then he spun to the girl and told her, "Your Majesty, he can be sold." And just like that, they were already stomping through the basement while Layla tried to wrap her head around why they were even here. Xiao snapped that she had to grip it tight. She clutched some mystery object but had zero clue what it was. And then Xiao said it was time. They were placing the magical stone right now. The girl already gripped a lantern-like thing in her hands, and it lit up just a chunk of the basement. She thought it was awesome, like real magic. He started fighting back, calling it a total trick-in, backing it up with sharp logic. A shiny copper plate with a tin reflector is shoved into a bamboo tube. A coil slides inside and wires up to a light bulb, and the moment you drop a magic stone in the tube, electricity springs to life. The girl lit up and said it was amazing. Now she wouldn't have to wrestle with a candle anymore. And Sho made sure everyone knew it'd be perfect the next time Leela needed to sneak off to the bathroom in the middle of the night. The queen snapped that they put it up for sale right away and kick off mass production ASAP, and the guy grinned he'd take it until he demanded one thing. Then the girl held her breath, desperate to hear exactly what he wanted. He has to forge crystal glass and magic to build the vacuum for this light part, and that means gallons of fuel just to make the glass itself. He'll crack the mass production method, but you're going to have to wait a bit. With pure excitement lighting up her face, she declares, "You've got this. I'll leave it in your hands." So Shaw strolled through the city when a woman popped up and greeted him, calling him Mr. Scholar. And when he replied, he just said the day felt perfect. On his way, a stranger clocked him as a master and even asked what he was hunting for, then leaned in and swore these were the newest, best swords around. He stared at his sword and bragged that he'd forged it with his own hands. Fashioned from scrap metal he'd just bought, then claimed he was a true master, but admitted he couldn't do everything alone, because only dwarves truly know how to forge blades like this. The merchant told him, "Come by whenever you can. I'd really appreciate it." And the show chuckled back, "Don't worry, I'll be back for sure." While he soaked up that amazing weather like it was pure good luck, the boy cracked a yawn, then strode down the street, slipping past a few alleys in eerie silence, until something inside him twisted and that strange unease wouldn't let go. He couldn't make sense of it. Then he felt someone's stare crawling up his skin, and boom. He knew he was being watched. He hurriedly begged them not to let it slip that the bandits were back for revenge over what happened last time, but he had no clue what to do next. Sho clocked the same attackers tailing him like before, and he knew they might not catch him off guard because he had a tried-and-true escape trick for pursuers. The man sprinted like his life depended on it, vanished around the corner, and waited in the shadows ready to catch the pursuer and finally see his real face. Then the girl tripped over his legs and crashed hard onto her back. Wincing in pain, Sho had no idea it was a child until that moment, and they just stared at each other in stunned silence. Tears spilled down the girl's face as she sobbed uncontrollably, and the boy instantly begged her to stop fighting back with, "I didn't do it," while people turned and stared at him, demanding answers. With shaky hands, he dove into his pockets, finally snagging a candy. Then he thrust it at her and promised he'd bring her even more sweet treats. The girl told him Maria says, "Don't take stuff from strangers," and he suddenly realized that if that happened in his world, he'd call the police without even blinking. The show assumed she didn't recognize him since he was the castle's chief scientist, but the girl insisted, "I know you because he's the host of the show." Then his shoulders finally dropped as he realized she truly did. If she knows who he is, then he's no stranger. He always slips his friends something sweet. For a second, she went quiet. Then her eyes lit up, and she snatched the candy. She took one bite and lit up, and the boy grinned and swore he made that candy himself using fruits he picked. She chooses the right moves and refuses to grab anything that isn't hers, because she's terrified of being snatched, shipped off, and sold like property, and Maria made that crystal clear. But out of nowhere, someone behind her swore she'd found something, and the boy snapped that she had no business taking anything from strangers. The girl blurted out that he was a real master of the show. She even knew him so she could take from him, while someone in the crowd yelled that it was unfair. The cat-eared boy grinned and said, "I know him too. He's old." Then added, "Sure, I can trick your sister, but not me." And Shaw couldn't help but think it was adorable. Since she works in the castle, Shaw couldn't believe it there was the Beast Man too, right on the job. Then it clicked. They weren't just talking about him, they were talking about her brother. So Nim's brother spoke up, asking them to stop treating him like some pet cat. He tried to tell me she bragged about having a sweet brother, but he snapped again that I should stop calling him sweet, because he's the one who'll run the family someday, rake in big money when he grows up, and make life way easier for his mom and sister. The show burst into tears in the shower, overwhelmed by how amazing it all felt, and then he promised he'd make it up to him with something sweet too. The other kids burst out that they'd help Maria every single day, and the boy shot back, "No worries, I'll hand one out to each of you." He couldn't wait to find out whether they were hunting people just to see how close they could creep in. Good thing it was him, because if it weren't, then his master would have been the one taking the fall. And, yeah, even their elf would have been tangled up in it too. He wanted to find out if they even knew his master, so he asked. And the kids blurted the same thing at once: "She's a witch." But I snapped my focus to the elf instead, and before I could breathe, the children shouted again in sync: "She's a destroyer." The boy insisted it's all about her. This elf is straight up dangerous, and you never have a clue what she's plotting in that head of hers. One guy said, if a real master snatches controlled the show, he'll turn it into some kind of magical experiment. Then the girl grinned and added, and it might even grow into a real monster. The show basically laughed, saying, where there's smoke, there's fire. Like that's exactly what went down. Because if they keep messing around like this, the parents are going to lose it. The kids huddled on the stone pavement, staring at each other like they couldn't believe it. Turns out they didn't have a father or a mother at all. Show froze in shock, then heard the news. There's a shelter right here. Maria lived with about 20 kids, and Show snapped that he didn't like their dangerous games, but promised he'd teach them to play it smarter instead, and all of his children perked up and couldn't wait. The Show dropped to the floor, carved a hunk of wood, turned it into a helicopter, and then started crafting their toys. 2 stilts, a slingshot, the whole lot rocking along with their interests as he went. Shaw was convinced every kid is pure magic, no matter where they're from, and he made his money doing genuinely interesting, real science to fund a shelter so those kids could be safe. When he was born into this world, he had 0 money, just grit. Now, he pulls in 3 gold coins a month, plus cash rewards every time he invents something, and he stacked up about 100 gold coins in savings. Night was rolling in fast, so Show told the kids it was time to head out since it was getting late, and he promised them a shelter if they helped guide the way, and the moment he said it, the children jumped at the chance. A 2-story house rose into view, and the kids blurted that they were home, spinning toward Sister Maria like, "We're back!" But she didn't even turn around, she just said, "Welcome home." Maria stepped out to fetch water, and then, boom, she spotted a man standing with her kids. He waved at her and told Maria he'd run into the children back in the city. The girl yanked her grip off the rope, hurled herself into Shaw's arms, sobbed her heart out, and then called him Mr. Zero. The boy's mind went blank at the girl's move. He had no standing at all, so he didn't know what to do. Then the other kids snapped their heads toward Sister Maria and shouted that it was a setup, swearing he was the real sage. The girl stared at him, cheeks burning, and then she realized she'd mixed him up with someone else. She blurted out an apology, but Shaw cut in right away, calming her down and telling her everything was fine. He made a beeline to confirm it was Maria, and the shy girl nodded and confirmed it. Then she sprinted over, told Maria that Mr. Shaw had made them a whole pile of toys. The girl said she gets that he cares about the kids, but she's terrified she can't ever repay him, so she begged him to come by even more often. Show sat at the communal table and blurted an apology for snacking them, and Maria grinned and said the kids were thrilled to see him. Then she snapped, hands together, and just like that, itadakimasu burst through the room. The kids chorused everything their mentor said in perfect sync, but Show just couldn't figure out what any of it meant, or why they were saying it. Maria leaned in and said, itadakimasu is this foreign tradition for thanking your food, and then she smiled, and Zero taught me. The boy went quiet, begged for a moment, and wondered if Zero was just as Japanese as he was. Then the girl spun to Mr. Shaw. She instantly regretted jumping to conclusions, because the truth was, she had no idea if he was really a Zero at all. Confusion hit hard as Show wondered if he was somehow connected to him. Then Maria cut in and shut it down. That wasn't the case at all. That wasn't the case at all. He was far braver than she ever thought. Maria snapped that he looked different, yet the aura was still the same. Zero then warned that the next time they met, he'd look even stranger, and poor Sho was left totally clueless about what kind of person Zero really was. The girl swore he saved her life when a brutal cough was killing her tuberculosis in her lungs. And then, on top of that, he healed her eyes, the ones that had been blind since birth. Sho was stunned that something like this could happen, but he still couldn't figure out who this so-called Zero really was, so he grilled me about the girl, kept pressing if he was a legit scholar mage, and wanted to know more since the guy was ridiculously skilled. She didn't hesitate. She blurted out that it all started when she was 12. Back when Maria was born blind and her own family cast her aside, then shipped her off to grind away in the imperial pavilion of the night sky. But the sickness hit her after a guest from their place carried the infection. And just like that, she fell ill then. They kicked her out of the pavilion of the night sky. While he started wandering the streets, the girl realized she was fading away. One day she woke up swallowed by darkness, perched beside a towering tree, and I knew that when her last breath finally came, that's exactly where she'd vanish. A mysterious silhouette cut in front of her, and a voice behind it demanded, "Do you want to live?" She panicked, swore it was God, and answered like she'd been blasted by a holy, blinding light. She said yes to his proposal, and the next time she opened her eyes, her cough was gone, completely vanished. When her vision finally cleared, it felt like God himself had come for her. She agreed, but only if one condition was met. She told me Master Zero swears this world has no God, only some being armed with knowledge and tech we can't even grasp, or someone who tricks people into believing. The man nodded and said he was on board, then leaned in like, "Yeah, but what happens next?" Zero told her to stick close to the teacher inside this shelter. Then she'd live through life with Master Zero and all the other kids, where every day felt bright and happy. But one day, Master Zero leaned in and told her he was heading back to a far-off foreign land. As she chased him through tears, Master Zero grabbed her attention and swore that Maria would guard their link, and if it was real, she'd get to see him again. Shaw was stunned, but Maria pressed on, saying the Zero wasn't random. It pointed to a destiny and a bond between souls. That guy totally clocked it. This Zero was probably Japanese, and then, right beside Blaha, someone else showed up too. Sure that she'd cross paths with Master Zero again someday, she vowed to treasure every moment of their connection, the moment it happened. The girl blurted that their teacher had died 2 years ago, and she prayed that, this time, he'd finally pass his connection to these kids. The room went deathly quiet. Then he snapped his head toward Maria and swore, "I'm not Zero," promising he'd do anything he had to. The guy started running the water lines for them, and suddenly, water shot straight into the house. He handed the kids water guns and Maria a brand new flashlight that nobody had ever seen before, and every girl around the table just stared in pure shock. Mr. Shaw shoved coins into the girl's hands, and she choked back tears as she thanked him for his kindness, because she had no idea how she could ever repay him. Through Russell, he tracked down a carpenter and ordered the repairs. He couldn't believe it when they paid him 80 gold coins for the work, but for the hero, safety comes first, no matter what. Out of nowhere, someone hit play on the switch, and the next second, Sho went crashing down. With his face pressed to his chest, the boy started picking himself apart because, yeah, they were bigger than the masters, and the girl was already calling him bad. The boy begged him to give him a minute and tried explaining everything. But the unfamiliar woman just stared back, totally lost on what he meant or where he was looking. He stared hard at the silver hair, the long ears, and that dark skin then. Sho couldn't help wondering if this guy was truly a dark elf, and just when he thought it was going to end, she snapped at him again. She felt crushed by the way he kept staring at her. Then boom, the show finally kicked off, and he was already rushing toward her, apologizing nonstop. When he tried to explain, she snapped that she was the one with a deadline. The very next day, Shaw burst into the diner where Nina worked and greeted her with a grin. Then he heard his own shock in the words she said that she was happy to see him too. Right then, a waiter slipped in with the news that someone was looking for Shaw, and it totally blindsided him. The elf he'd been sprinting away from stood right there by the table, glaring at him with pure indignation. Then it hit him yesterday when he was halfway through his story, but the girl had cut him off, burst out an apologetic, "I'm so sorry," and left him frozen in shock. She came hunting for the real demon master, but the more she heard, the colder it got, because everything pointed to the same guy she'd thrown out before, and since he eats there, she figured, all right, I'm waiting. Sho's face burned as he blurted an apology for staring, claiming, "That's just how men are." But Fei Fei cut him off. She said she was used to it, then introduced herself by name and looked at him like a true master once more. And just like that, the girl lunged and grabbed the boy. She pleaded for him, praying he'd save her village, and the boy had no clue what was going on. He heard the road into the valley straight to the dark elf village of Fei Fei was smashed on both sides by massive landslides, and now it was completely cut off. The dark elf village sits at the far end of the western gorge on Felon's side, and they got lucky, riding a cart with a merchant as he pushed west. The show was convinced dark elves could wield magic, and the girl snapped. Yeah, they can, but not with a boulder this huge. They won't be able to do a thing. The boy couldn't believe he was really that big, panicked over what to do next, and figured the only move was to go ask the wizard who wielded powerful magic. Fifi snapped that it would be way too expensive money's tight in their village, but real masters don't move for just cash. Sometimes they throw themselves into the work for an idea that matters. He laughed it off, saying, stuff like that happens, but the truth hit hard. He's still weak, especially when a pretty girl asks for a favor until he finally gets what it really means to be a man. He told her she could call him Show and that he might think of something on the spot, and once the girl agreed, they rode on in the cart as it rattled like crazy, while the boy just couldn't figure out what was going on. The coachman snapped his head toward the true master and blurted, "We're in big trouble." Demons ringed them in a tightening circle, and in the bushes, multiple eyes had already popped out hungry, waiting to strike. Face snapped, "Those are black wolves," and instantly knew somehow they'd crashed right into their territory. Shaw was frozen, not knowing what to do, and the girl snapped that they'd throw the wolves off then. The wolves surged out of the bushes, jaws bared, and the elf shouted at Shaw that they could scramble up a tree. He dropped the extra weight, snatched a branch, and shot up into the tree while the wolves scrambled to climb after him, claws scraping all the way. The show claimed there were too many of them, and the girl blew up because her bow was stuck in repairs. The boy's nerves spiked. He panicked, convinced they were trapped, and went stone still. Then the fairy snapped him back to reality. Magic. She's got fire magic, but she refuses to unleash it. Black wolf pelts fetch a fortune, so you don't torch them. Show was trying to warn them about something far more specific. Lightning magic singes a few people, and the ones closest to it crumple from the blast. Then the girl flashes a big grin and insists she's okay and she gets it, because if lightning hit that tree, it'd be total disaster. So he has to come up with something fast. Then it hit him an idea. If the spirits cast their blessing, it'll shield everything around them. His lightning magic yanks down the air pressure, blasts water into vapor, and summons storm clouds. She's all in. But the boy fires up a weather simulation instead. There was zero water around, yet the forest still felt drenched with moisture. The sky stayed heavy with dark clouds. Lightning started cracking open the air, and after a tense stretch, it finally struck right toward them. The boys dropped from the tree and bolted, and when they looked back, every wolf was already lying still. Faye's heart felt a strange, dangerous relief. A man in a wheelchair sat there, waiting on 2 passengers, and when the girl rolled up to the merchant, she demanded to know exactly how much he'd pay for them. But the merchant wouldn't let it slide. He needed proof they were really confident. And when he pushed, the girl just shrugged and said she had enough money to back it up. Show told her, "Think about it. I've always wanted to try Black Wolf," and the girl snapped back, "That's the one," pointing to that show where Boulder crushes the road to her village. He spotted the boulder and froze, convinced it couldn't possibly be real, until he had no clue what it was or how it even landed there. It was so monstrous that everyone nearby looked like tiny insects beneath it. Everyone erupted in relief. The second Fei Fei came back, and she instantly snapped her head toward the guys and declared she'd brought them a real master. The crowd erupted into applause, praying this meant they were safe. At last, while he still couldn't wrap his head around how he was supposed to pull it off now. The Dark Elves village clings to this continent, right beside a massive rock that runs east to west, tucked at the very end of a valley carved when the rift first split the land. Right now, a giant boulder around 30 meters tall crashed down from the cliff and smashed into the valley, blocking the road so hard that vans and every other vehicle can't pass. The kid finally cracked open magic then. Boom and explosion tore through everything that Shaw scrambled to cover up. And when the smoke vanished, a black hole was sitting right where his magic used to be. That whole magic of compressing air only scorched the surface. Like a sad little warm-up back in the old world, this would have gone nuclear like a dynamite blast, And he knew he couldn't stop there. He needed a much higher level of heating. When you squeeze air, it heats up fast. Those tiny molecules get trapped in a smaller space and start moving with way more energy, dumping out heat as they go. Squeeze it twice as hard, and you're not just adding a little warmth. You crank out way more heat, and the breaking force shoots up. He's trying to fire off multiple kinds of magic at once, brutally hard, but doable, and for the first time ever, he's attempting to cast the very same magic twice at the same time. Double activating two different kinds of magic is like gripping one baseball bat with both hands full power, straight drive, while stacking the same magic twice is like laying one bat on top of another. That boy's itching to try something wild, dangerous as hell, so everyone back off, and you need to zero in and focus. The center flares white, meaning it's hotter than 5,000 degrees, and when the guy tests his method on a stone, it doesn't just crack, it starts melting right in front of him. Then he dove even deeper, and right on cue, shock exploded in the boy's eyes as a thick black liquid started pouring out of the stone. Molten stone started blasting upward, and Sho went pale with fear, because it was right there, right on top of him, all thanks to the one moment he let his guard down. He might have busted out by drilling a clean straight hole that shot the pressure higher, and right then, Faye knew she was about to lose her life. She snapped his attention back with her calls, and thank goodness, Sho finally opened his eyes. The girl kept pressing, desperate to make sure he was okay. He blurted an apology, admitting he'd run out of magic, and she already knew this mess would hit Sho hard, especially with those boulders standing in the way. If they don't tear it down, they'll just clear the path for the cart, showing that this magic is the key to letting him pass. It's special, limited to just 2 uses per day. So yeah, he may have to wait. The girl grinned and said it wasn't even close to how hard they had trained on their skills. The Sho fought to clear the way, but when the stone finally cracked, it didn't break all the way. If you slide a double compression sleeve across sideways, the moment you let go, lava blasts out and you get a deadly explosion. So don't do that. Push it straight, then a little down and back, straighten it again, then a final little down and back. Sho groaned that this was brutally exhausting, and he let slip the master could finally take a break right when Faida asked. Now Sho dropped to his knees in front of her, and a hot wave of shame flooded his face. He couldn't believe they valued him so much. It freaked him out a little, honestly. The girl snapped. That's not it. We're just trying to keep the right people happy because you're useful. The other elves snapped, almost offended, insisting nobody had ever treated them this kindly until Faye marched out of the tent and ordered them to shut up, reminding them they still had trash to clean, and the boy stared like, wow, these elves were the real Amazons. 10 days went by, and every time they fired off their magic, it kept pushing, until the hole in the boulder started widening like it had nowhere left to hide. At last, the tunnel finally swung open, and everyone erupted with relief. Now the path to the village was clear again. The Dark Elves' elder stood there, stunned. He didn't even know how to thank him for saving them. They caught sight of that ancient old man and instantly started guessing his age, and right there I blurted, "Don't stress, you're fine," loud and clear. Just knowing they confirmed the magic's double activation was a win for him, because the scream Leela would have torn out of her if he'd done it in the castle is something he couldn't even bring himself to imagine. I figured they dug up some rare mineral you'd only find in this corner of the world, or maybe a weird, unbelievable color that nobody's ever seen. But one of the girls swore she'd seen black stones, so the boy grilled her again because he was convinced they were obsidian. She couldn't believe it was obsidian because it was literally falling apart in her hands, and when Faye asked about it, he just admitted he didn't get how something that fragile could possibly be useful. The Sho demanded they grab him and figure out where he was, so they were told he'd be on the rocky wall right at the valley entrance. On the way back, the boy asked for a tour, and the girls agreed on the spot. Faith swore Shaw was the village's benefactor, and she promised she'll back it up herself. A limestone hill rose in front of them, and the girls snapped, "The stones are right here!" The elf swore this sphere is carved from black stone, but one good hit, and it turns to dust so brittle it can't even hold up as an arrowhead. Sho started tapping again like he was testing fate, and when he finally got that tiny chunk of stone in hand, he just had to verify it was exactly what he'd been betting on. He piled stone on stone and tried to set the whole thing ablaze, and when it actually caught, Faye nearly lost his mind because that rock was burning. But that man couldn't help feeling relieved because Ugolki exists, and it's the real doorway to the Industrial Revolution. But the elf froze in shock. Those stones were blazing like pure magic. So the boy jumped in and said, "Magic just powers the flames, but these stones burn by themselves." He fixed the fuel problem in an instant, and then added the craziest part: they could even run a steam engine. No matter what happens, he'll race over with the sample to Her Highness and lay out every detail, while we scramble to pull in people for the investigation. The girl groaned that they'd gone too far since dusk was creeping in, and the boy promised they'd halt somewhere today. But she snapped that she wouldn't be heading back so soon, so they finally stopped in the field. Sho froze in shock, and Fei Fei shot back that they've always been nearby, then told him not to worry because they're elves. The boy shook his head and said it wasn't about that at all. He just never thought there'd be room for him. The elf admitted, "Yeah, it's a total mess around here," then grinned and said he could crash the night with her. She'd cook him dinner herself. That morning, Shaw stretched out on the couch, grimacing because his back hurt like hell then, after his morning pull-ups. He snapped his focus to something new. The fairy dozed in peace, and the boy tiptoed out of the room like a sneaky shadow. The queen snapped with irritation, wondering where he'd disappeared, to then it hit her. He'd gone straight to the village of the Dark Elves, and somehow she believed that place was cozy as hell. Still, she pushed the worry aside and prayed for good news, and the man gladly agreed. He dumped several chunks of coal onto the table, and Leela stared at that black stone like it was supposed to make no sense. Then she blurted, "It's just a black stone." Now they were standing in Resale's workshop, and the man was pushing the idea that this stone could be used as fuel, while the queen caught it instantly and knew it wasn't magic at all. The man cleared it up, fast no magic stone, no mana at all. So Sho leaned in, grabbed a look, started dumping coal into a special device, and then lit it up. Lila couldn't believe how awesome it was, and Rezel swore this machine's firepower is insane, and that it'll save them from the brutal fuel shortage. Sho said it could be used at home. They'd steam the stones, fire up the furnace to strip the impurities, and forge them into coke so they could finally process way more iron than ever before. But there was a nasty catch: smoke pollution was choking the city, and every time coal was burned, smoke and soot rolled through the streets, putting everyone's health in real danger. During the Industrial Revolution, coal fires belched deadly smoke and crushed lives by the thousands, and as a country grew richer, the pollution only got worse. Leela thought he was just mulling over what to do with it, and he snapped back, "Of course I am." Then smoke burst into the water soot, and toxins vanished and washed away. The nasty part of coal smoke is the hydrogen sulfide it carries, because it seeps into water and turns it deadly. Yet the girls still fretted about what he'd do with that poisoned water. And yeah, there's one grim fix people use: toss insects straight into it. In a world with no sewage systems, insects chow down on corpses, and sludge then scrub rivers and canals, clean like nature's relentless cleanup crew. They had to count the insects, but they figured they could manage, and Leela got it instantly. Raziel even called it a smart move, and the girl pushed for sending a team of researchers straight into the coal mines. To crack open a mine, you've got to smash through the land-lay roads, cut down forests, throw up bridges, and then build a railway to haul the coal out, because the whole job is an endless mountain of work. Stella caught the girl's gaze and blurted out that Shaw was back, so the boy snapped his head toward the master and Stella, completely baffled about what had just happened. Rubia couldn't wrap her head around what had been happening for 10 days. He'd vanished without telling her, or even his master just claiming he had business and was stuck in the village of Dark Elves. The girls practically gasped when they heard about Dark Elves, but the boy just stared, totally lost on what they even were. The girls figured he'd come for one reason: staring at giant boobs, because in their heads, Dark Elves were only famous for that. Shao snapped back that they were totally wrong. He helps them fix their problems, period. So the master understood everything, yet couldn't figure out what he liked more, her breasts or the Dark Elves, and Shao answered without hesitation, "Obviously, it's his master's breasts." Rubia was staring at him like, "What are you even basing that on?" And I finally got it. He had something to compare it to. Right then, Faye barged in and demanded answers, asking Shaw why he was taking so long, and the whole room snapped at her with pure irritation. But then Boom, an elf and a Dark Elf, finally cross paths, and they're thrown off the moment they see each other's look. Sho squirmed with awkward heat and blurted out that this is one of the 36 strategies. "Forget any fancy plan, the only way out is to run," the girl snapped, and he fired back, "Goodbye." They bolted between the shops again, slid into a good spot, and Shaw finally stopped long enough to catch his breath, because after running for so long, he was fully convinced elves and dark elves absolutely can't stand each other. Fi lays it out. The dark elves swear there's an old legend that elves and dark elves once shared the same ancestors and even lived together in the elven world. They never saw eye to eye, so their rage tore their world apart, and when everything collapsed, they were forced into this new world on the deal that they'd abandon their old one, and when Shaw heard the whole truth, it hit him so hard he couldn't stop staring. Suddenly, the crew burst into the show screaming, "Rune!" and the whole crowd erupted. People bolted out of the city yelling that everything was dangerous and they had to escape right now. One of the residents suddenly stopped the show and begged the host for help. While sobbing, he claimed a demon had kidnapped his child. The whole show snapped to attention, then stared straight toward where the runners were charging from. The orphanage kid dangled in the clutches of a creature, screaming for help, while a monstrous demon loomed over him and leaves whirled around it like a storm. Below, crowds were yelling for help, while a harpy clutched the boy in her grip, and Faye couldn't make sense of why she was even there. Sho realized the lightning and Fei-Fei's magic would slam into the child, and he scrambled to think of a move. Then the moment he even asked, the answer popped into his mind instantly. He remembered the slingshot he built while playing with the kids in the shelter, and he realized that if he fused his magic with Fei-Fei's, it would be strong enough to wipe them out. His kinetic energy surged based on his mass, and that meant every kick of speed hit even harder, so he launched a projectile straight at the monster. The heavier the ball, the more brutal its power. But if magic slashes its weight and spikes its speed, it hits way harder, until the spell gets cut right before impact. Sho was so sure she could behead the man, then he snapped to the truth. He had to shoot him again. Then right on cue, the arrow slammed into the monster's heart, and the boy practically froze in shock. Russell gripped a bow and snarled that monster was nothing but filth. Then he screamed for her to let the boy go right when the show saw him and praised him for helping. The bird let out a brutal roar and whimpering cries as pain ripped through it. Fei-Fei snarled that she'd strike, then promised she'd drop masonry on them too. A hurricane of furious winds started swirling around the bird, and everyone scrambled inside the building before it got any worse. The bird warped its form and blasted deadly projectiles straight at the townspeople and the heroes. Out of nowhere, Stella burst in front of the guys, and they snapped up their protective barrier on instinct. Shaw practically exhaled with relief when he saw her. He stared at her work. Stunned, it was incredible. The barrier won't stop him from seeing, but it hard stops every physical strike cold. The Stella spun around with proud confidence and swore she could even deflect a dragon's fire. Sho couldn't even wrap his head around it. He watched the photons slip right through him, which is why it won't stop lasers, microwave, magic, or any beam harvesting attack from solar panels. Rubella burst into the scene, panicked, and immediately clocked, Sho warning him she could hurt him, and then shoved him back because the girl was seconds away from exploding. The boy snapped at her to stop and told her to wait, convinced she'd lost her mind because kids were right there and she could torch the whole city. Rubia said it was fine if a few victims had to be moved. She froze, eyes serious, not knowing her next move. Then Ficky leaped onto the balcony and yanked Rossley's focus off his task for half a second. Joke. And that's the moment she demanded he hand over the bow, grabbed it herself, and took it. She yanked the bowstring tight, then loosed an arrow with everything she had straight into the monster's face. The giant clamped the boy in his paw, shook the whole city with another brutal roar, then finally let go, and the boy dropped fast through the air. Faye screamed at Sho to snap his attention then. Sho snapped his head up and saw the boy dropping fast. Sho bolted toward him as he slammed closer to the ground, and right then he chose to fire his weight reduction power. The Sho caught him a split second from hitting the floor, and before he could even react, they slammed straight through the window in a blur of motion. He burst to the door in a few bounding jumps, and the girl froze with shock, stabbing her mouth shut like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. The boy blurted out for her to watch the kid, and the moment she heard him, panic. She swallowed hard. Trembling hands reached out, and she cradled him in her arms while tears burned in her eyes, and her whole face turned flustered. Sho barked at her to rush inside, already screaming because he feared for every resident in the city, and for that child who had nearly been snatched by that bird. The girl steadied herself, met his eyes, and nodded hard, refusing to hesitate. The bird snapped its sword up, and Sho and Fei-Fei instantly locked on as the bird's attack ward back projectiles blasting straight toward the boy, so they shouted for help again. So there was no escaping anymore. He got slammed again and again, and one brutal hit landed straight in the heart while the girl screamed his name in pure terror. Stones slammed into the boy and ripped through his body with pain, while the dark elf shrieked in pure panic. Then his phone shattered, and suddenly he was flooded with memories of the past. He hits record, leans into the camera, and launches right into it. He introduces the show like a hero, then declares himself the channel's king of inventions. He swings the camera around and flashes the alarm clock, shouting that today they're finally starting to build it, because this model ticks on its own, no strings attached. In the end, he spots the recording cutting out halfway, rewinds, and checks the whole thing. Then, right at the finish, the guy pleads, "Subscribe to the channel and smash that like button." He checks his video stats and sees 12 views already, with only 3 subscribers so far. But he grins because that number is climbing and fresh comments keep popping up. The main character wrestles with his next target in his head, then slips into a daydream about finally grabbing a brand new camera. Suddenly, the boy catches his name in the air, snaps his eyes open, and sucks in a sharp, shaking breath. The girl beside him snaps that his chest is hurt, and she'll fix it right now. Then the show just shrugs and insists he's totally fine. In the secret pocket of his coat sat the one thing that kept death at bay, and now he's staring at it like, why am I risking my life for this? The man demands where the harpy is, and they finally reveal the truth. She's up on guard, circling high in the sky. The girl argues, "We saved the kid, so just blow everything up and hit the attack." But Shaw snaps back, refusing it, because they need to minimize damage to the city. The girl blurts out, "So what do we do now?" And he shoots back, "I've got an idea, but I'm not strong enough to cast magic on something that huge. I'll need it from you." She finally gets what he means, and the main character bolts forward, promising he'll take her there then. When he flashes the signal, they can start. The boy slams a ball into existence and hurls it straight at the harpy, and she's caught completely off guard, pure shock on her face. She backs away, then Shaw barks at the master, "Start now." The girl snaps her staff up and hurls a spell that makes her grow heavier. The monster crashes down, and the main character yanks out a knife and charges straight at it. In midair, he racks up extra weight and then slams the heart with everything he's got. Blood splattered as the enemy collapsed, hit the ground, and went still, proof that the monster was finally defeated. The girl demanded to show, "Are you finished with me?" And she answered, word for word, "According to what I said." Cheers erupted as everyone shouted that the show's host had slain the harpy, and the whole crowd instantly cheered in joy. Stella even chimed in that she almost never gets a body this fresh, with materials this valuable, and she's determined to have it brought straight back to the castle later. Dad closes in on the rescued boy and his mother, and the second they spot him, they yank each other into a tight hug, sobbing tears of pure joy. Just like that, Layla bursts into the carriage right there with Shaw. She snaps, "Are you okay?" And Shaw stares in shock, because he never expected her to be here. She snaps that she heard something, dashes over, and when she sees him riddled with wounds, she stares and demands, "Did you kill the demon?" The main character swears he didn't pull it off solo. His buddies, the master, Stella, and Fei, the dark elf, all had his back. He also tells us the gunsmith backed him up, and he's so grateful it practically pours out of him. His Highness announces that, for their fearless deed, she'll reward them with 2 shining gold coins. The boy blurts out, "Do you want me to hand them back?" And Layla shoots back that she's got 0 cash on her, but she'll return it later. The girl throws her gratitude at Fei for the help, then begs her to come visit. At the castle, Fei and another knight square off with swords, battling it out in an all-out duel. The girl wins for real by catching her opponent off guard and disarming them mid-battle. Leela beams at her, plants her hands on her hips, and declares no question her skills are unbeatable. Her assistant shot back, "Are you sure? Dark elves can't be trusted." And she snapped, "Yes, because even if we know there's a village on our territory, dark elves aren't official residents here. They're ready to hire the best of the best." And the girl fires back, "I've heard you've done everything you can to protect the show and make sure the city doesn't get harmed." She says Mizuki just slipped off to the Empire and might end up escorting her, yet the elf refuses to believe a single word. She fires off, "So that means I'll get paid?" Leela nods yes, quiet, a little shy. The boy beams because of his girlfriend, and she tells him that for a dark elf, living and serving in that castle is a real dream. She's overflowing with gratitude toward the main character. Meanwhile, Leela just stands to the side and warns that once some time passes, she'll probably regret saying it. After a while, the guy storms into the room, staring at his shattered phone. He knows his hands aren't as steady anymore, but that thing was his loyal lifeline. Now he fears he can't even film the stuff he and his magic invented in this world. The boy slides it into the box, snaps it shut, and blurts out thanks because that man just saved his life. He slumps onto the bed, eyes locked in thought, and starts wrestling with the demons that won't leave him alone. His master laid it out for him. Demons don't usually hunt humans, at least. Not like that. He finally got why they'd strike people in the first place. Humans keep barging into their territory. But then the harpy came straight into the city to slaughter, and Shaw couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously off. A few weeks later, he strolled down the street and spotted a carriage rolling by. His quiet smile flickered fast, and surprise hit him like a wave. The show basically goes, whoa, she's super luxurious, and then throws a question in your face. Why does she have to sneak through the back gate when the big shots come in through the front? Nim, suddenly called from behind, greeted him with a cheerful good morning, then pressed, where have you been this early? And he shot back that he'd slipped into the forest to hunt for ingredients. She blurts, do you want breakfast? And the girl snaps back that Her Highness is waiting for him in the office because a guest is there, and he immediately assumes the wheelchair guy is the one they mean. Right there in the office, Lila corners Rubia and asks how she's doing, but Rubia snaps that she can't help. At all then the door swings open, and some guy walks in, asking if she'd like to come see him. Lila bursts with relief as he finally arrives. The girl steps up to present the show to Princess Mi Lunihi. Lunihi bows low, then beams and says he's thrilled to meet you. The girl with the scar on her face steps up and introduces herself as Me Luna Faltista, first princess of Faltis, then tells you, just call me Maruna. The princess declares that in Faltis, people swear Faltis is a legendary master who hunts the truth, and he's the only one who can save her. The boy spots the burn, realizes it's brutal, and blurts out what happened. She explains that she was out in the forest like always, picking a plant for her hobby, when a demon suddenly attacked her. Lately, everyone's been whispering that demons sometimes hunt people, yet she never, ever imagined they'd come for her. Lila remembers the harpies showing up just recently, and her stomach drops. Demons are getting closer to Farlin, and she's even heard rumors that flying dragons have been spotted here, leaving the boy staring in shock at the thought. The girl whips around to Sho and pleads, asking if he can help with Maluna's wounds. Then Sho snaps that if his own master couldn't, he's got no power at all. The hero remembers how, in his world, burns are handled with skin grafts, or by letting skin regrow from the scraps left behind. Suddenly, he remembers the orchid clone he pulled off twice with a flick of magic. And the show starts asking the wild question, could the same trick work on skin, too? The girl leans in and asks him straight out if he's got a better idea. The main character blurts out, I've got an idea, but admits it's still theoretical. He doesn't know if it'll work for real or what disaster or miracle it could unleash. But the man insists the curse will heal bit by bit, so everyone's stuck waiting. Yet the princess nods along, smiling sweetly, and sneers that there's nothing good about that ugly royal daughter. She tells him, if I can't get my old face back, I won't even make it home. The guy just stares, totally clueless about what she's saying. Maruna slaps a hand to her chest, declares she has nothing left to lose, and dares him. Go on. Do it. He can't wrap his head around how she could call herself worthless just because she lost her looks, and he's still stuck on the real reason. The girl declares that someone's worth isn't just skin deepen. Yeah, that hits hard because it's true. Maruna tells him she's the princess of Tiny Faltis, and if she wants her family and country to survive, she has to marry the right family before time runs out, so she's been pushing herself to stay perfect. This isn't just a promise, it's her royal mission. The boy can't stop wondering if she's destined to marry for the country's sake, while the girl nods and declares, I was born a rose, not a wildflower. All the other girls just stare in stunned silence. Then the main character leans in and says he finally gets what she's feeling. He admits this method has never been tested on humans, and he has no clue what side effects or consequences might hit, so the show warns the girl to be ready, and she nods, agreeing. After a while, the princess is strapped on the operating table, and the main character stands right beside her, fully suited up in a medical mask, ready for what's next. He grabs the scalpel, steadies his nerves, and goes for it. If anything goes sideways, he's convinced the master will have his back. The boy declares he'll start on the shoulder and wipe it down with alcohol, and Myron nods along. Then he hits them with anesthesia and plunges the required object into the liquid using 4 forceps. He claims it's a special medicine that deadens the pain for a while, and then wildly he admits he's using spider venom to numb her for real. When he made chocolate, he also pulled out poison and turned it into a local anesthetic that worked shockingly well. The boy warns her she'll get so cold she won't even be able to feel him anymore, and Maruna snaps back, "I'm freezing, like really freezing." Ruby's stunned that he'd even think of something like that. Then he snaps, "I can't use paralysis magic." So even a regular doctor no magic training at all can still pull it off. He leans in and asks the patient if she feels sick if anything at all hurts. She shakes her head and says, "No, I feel fine." The hero slashes a precise incision, then starts folding the skin back into place while blasting a growth-boosting spell to kick the healing and reactions into overdrive. The growth acceleration spell supercharges normal dermis to grow, and when you stack it with growth magic, it kicks cells tied to growth into non-stop replication. Skin cells kick into overdrive, multiplying faster than ever, and fresh skin starts sealing the wound from the inside out. Give it half an hour, and it can patch back about 3 centimeters. Then, with its magic humming, it keeps restoring 5 to 6 centimeters every single day. He blurts that she looks stunning today. Then he hands her a mirror and says it used to heal only halfway now. It's mending beautifully, like magic. And when she stares at it, the girl lights up, saying she's never seen a mirror so beautiful before, and smiles. She throws an apology his way, grabs her attention, and says, "Don't stare at the mirror, look at what I fixed." The princess leans in, shocked by the restoration, and blurts out, "It's wonderful." Later, Layla dug into pancakes smothered with Mont Blanc cream and a side of boiled beans with Mont Blanc cream and boiled beans, and the main character nearly choked, because when Layla said they were cousins, it hit him hard. Then she revealed the truth. Her late mother and Queen Felthus were sisters. She adds that they only catch a glimpse of each other once a year now, but back when, they'd run wild at the Fardus royal villa by the lake. Maruna's voice turns wistful as she admits she misses those days, and the boy just stares at her, utterly disbelieving. The princess says this place feels like it was ripped straight from another world, then spots mouth-watering pastries she's never laid eyes on, and steps into a bright room lit by gorgeous crystal-like glass. She tells Leela, yeah, she's probably resting, she's got an amazing owner, and then drops the real thought, "I bet she's just jealous of you." The girl steps up to show and promises to pay him double no, triple if he'll work for her, and Leela snaps with fury, demanding how she dares say something like that right in front of her. He bursts into laughter, throws out an apology, and refuses her, because he's already promised Her Highness he'll build this country, and he can't just walk away. She's stunned by the true master's oath and immediately likens him to a knight, because she's never seen anyone like him. Most real masters don't pick just anybody. They go for employers who truly deserve them. He insists it's not about the money, truth is. He can fund research, but right now he's got just enough to eat. That's when Leela tells the girl the show hands the winnings straight to an orphanage, and Maruna's jaw drops in pure shock. The main character blurts out that every bit of this is for Farlane, because kids are the country's greatest treasure. The girl thinks he's totally weird, while the princess shrugs and says it actually makes perfect sense. Maruna snaps that it's cruel to rob a gifted kid of their dreams just because of the family they were born into, and she swears that pouring resources into children, the ones who will someday hold up their country, will make the future stronger for everyone. The main character can't stop wondering, does the princess really have the gift of a true master? And when he finally gets it, Layla's stunned he didn't spot it sooner. She claims she trained under a master. Then the show is about to reply, and bam! Stella storms into the room, saying she's hit by the sweetest feeling. Maruta walks up to her and blurts, "Wow, we haven't seen each other in ages." The moment those words land, she's totally shocked by this girl. Stella stares at her reflection in shock, blurts out what that scar is, and calls it disgusting. Then the main character clicks that Stella is actually the princess's mistress. She was treated for 3 whole days and everything seemed perfect. Then on the 4th day, Princess Maluna suddenly spiked a brutal high fever. The medicine patched up the skin fast, blasting the body's healing powers into overdrive. This takes everything out of her, and she finally admits she needs sleep. Then, right in the dead of night, a show gets announced. Leela grabs his attention and begs him to come back, then tells him to retell that story again. The main character asks where he stopped, and the girl snaps back that this is exactly where heroes come to grieve the love they never got to finish. The main character leans in and asks the girl how she's doing. She lights up and tells him she feels way better today. The boy spots it. Princess Maluna's burn scars are fading fast, healing right before his eyes. Right in front of him, the main character rises to his feet and calmly pours water onto the plant like it's nothing. Suddenly, a princess strides up to him and declares she's after a rare plant. She begs to see it, and the man doesn't refuse her. Shaw tells Maruna the treatment's finally reaching its end, and she nods along, then admits she has no idea how to thank him. The main character fires back that the only thing that matters is that she's okay, and the girl's face lights up as she blushes, then snuggles right into him. He tosses the funnel aside and snaps that she can't do that. She rushes to apologize, then admits she's never felt anything like this before. The hero tells her, once your face heals, you'll get back to your duties, and she nods, though she doesn't fully agree. The show gets nervous and insists she's probably mistaking the joy from her healed burn scars for feelings for him. But the girl shoots back that he's a truly wonderful person. Princess Maruna flat out tells him she isn't right for him, and, shockingly, she's dead on. She asks if meeting her earlier would have changed his fate, and he says no, because he owes everything not just to Her Highness, but to the Master, Stella, and every single person who keeps the castle running. She blurts the question again, because she still doesn't get what they're talking about. And the main character shoots back, I meant Miss Rubia. Then he leans in and tells her how, after getting lost in the forest and ending up here, it was her who pulled him through and forged him into a real master. He adds that without this whole thing, he never would have met her. Then the girl chokes out a sad laugh, staring at the world like it hurts, and whispers that she'd rather be born a wildflower than a rose. The princess spun to go, then finally blurted, my parents are coming to get me next week. She's stunned when she hears the king and queen are actually coming themselves. She tells them in her letters that her burn scars are healing fine, and now the royal couple wants to meet her and him face to face. He flashes a grin and tells her, all right then, show them my beautiful face. She whips her gaze to him, fighting back tears as she smiles and says, okay. Just a week later, Marota's face looked healed, and King Faltus and Queen Eliza couldn't believe what they were seeing. The man calls it a miracle, but the woman snaps that she won't buy it. Then the princess herself steps in and tells them it was Sho who healed her face. The king clasped his hand and declared it a real miracle, and the boy stood there, completely shocked and totally lost for words. He insists it's no miracle, just healing with answers, powered by reason and magic, and forged by the princess's brutal trials and relentless grit. The king rushes in to thank him for rescuing the princess from a fate that can't be undone, and the hero just shrugs like, yeah, even the big shots bow to you. The man shoots back a firm no, then thanks him, not as a king, but as the father of his beloved daughter. Fultus drops his head and bows, thanking him too. After a while, the main character drags the queen and the princess to his workshop and tells them to go explore, since His Majesty's meeting with the queen still isn't finished. The woman whips around to Sho and demands to know if the magic that saved her daughter can heal anyone else too. She rubs her face and admits the corners of her eyes have started getting wrinkles, and the main character shrubs it off, saying those are just wrinkles. And since he's already taken on the job of pulling the sag out from under her chin, he can handle this too. And she's left staring, shocked he can actually do it. He tells her that, compared to saving the princess's burned skin, this is nothing. So Shaw pushes her to try, and the woman's face lights up as she happily agrees. King Faltus and Leela wrap up their meeting, and he tells her it was brief but wildly productive, while Leela insists they're swamped, because they've already decided it's time to leave. Bilto rushes back to his wife and tells her it's time to get ready, they're leaving now. Then he suddenly stops dead, staring at how different she looks. He asks Eliza what happened to her face, and she bursts into laughter, genuinely thrilled that he finally noticed. She tells him she'll borrow the local craftsman's magic too, and the man, stunned, blurting out, so you mean a youth elixir? She tells him, I'm still the same age, he just stretched the wrinkles on my face a little, and give it time, they'll snap back to normal. But he can't wrap his head around how any of that is even possible. But the king swears his magic will win over every woman, and before long, wild rumors about that miraculous healing spread like wildfire through the kings and nobility across the whole continent. As the princess got her gorgeous skin back and the queen turned young again, invitations, proposals, and suitors came flooding in from every noble lady and royal family in sight. The main character opens up a woman on the operating table, then promises he'll freeze her skin day after day, Her wrinkles and sagging fade away, but the results still don't hit right, and he nearly breaks down, convinced he's not even a real cosmetic surgeon. Leela and Sho are sipping tea when she suddenly clocks it he's not okay. He admits he's wiped out, and if he keeps getting requests every single day, his body will break down for real. Leela smiles anyway because at least he's pulling in money. She remembers everyone swearing that the second Maruno's face was fixed. Offers came flooding in, so the girl can't help but ask, "So, were you ugly before?" The boy leans in and asks what she thinks can Princess Maruna land the perfect match. The queen just smiles and tells him there are tons of people out there who'd snap up the chance to look good. In that shadowy alley, one woman's got a name in her head. She thinks Maruna should go to Viscal for us. People trust him. And, yeah, he's not a bad pick. She's convinced he'll never turn into a family man. The title sounds way too weak, so she won't recommend it. But the main character shrugs and says the title can be anything, then fires off an example. He proposes handing him the crystal glass production, then makes the announcement that the Viscount has finally cranked out crystal by the masses, and pushes him up to a higher rank, because before long, he'll be a duke. The girl snaps that it's a lie, but the boy fires back that it's just first impressions. He's convinced Princess Maruna was trained by a real master, and she's the one you should trust with glasswork. The queen snaps that Princess Maruna was in love with him and labels Shaw a total monster, and the main character is left totally clueless about what she's even talking about. Then Her Highness fired off a letter to Faltus, introducing the Viscount and laying out the big news. Industrial growth is booming across his lands, and the future ahead looks wildly promising. Princess Maruna locked eyes with him and felt her heart ignite. Now they're joyfully engaged, and everything feels right. The hero burst onto the Viscount's estate for a quick spell, ready to teach them the secrets of glassmaking. If he pulls off the glass factory, every other project crumbles. But to save the people of Farlane, he had no choice. He had to do it. So much time has blown past since the last day the main character sat at his mentor's place out in the forest. Rubia frets that he trekked all the way here and demands what he's doing, and the boy answers that it just hit him. He remembered the harpy after hearing a demon attacked her. The show warns that if chaos hits, Farlane has to stand his ground and fight with his own hands. No magic rescue. That's why he's hell-bent on brewing a fire potion, basically. Gunpowder in a bottle. The girl blurts out, shocked, "You mean that as a weapon?" And the story answers, loud and clear, yes. Like a real master, he's sure she's picturing what happens when that weapon finally goes past the limit, so Rubia thinks it over for a moment, nods along, and then makes one thing crystal clear. She's not about to step in or mess with what he's doing. The girl warns that if Sho even tries to turn it into something evil, as its mistress, she'll throw everything she's got in his way, no matter what it takes. The boy flashes a grin and blurts out that he's thrilled she's his mistress. He says, "Then I'll make it to work." And because it's way too dangerous, the main character grabs her attention and begs her to stay right beside him. Right away, he dives into making gunpowder. Saltpeter is the key ingredient he's determined to use. You'll need forest humus and the manure from the owner's yard. So yeah, it's basically what its owner throws out, plus a little bit of itself. It blends manure with humus, sprinkles in a magic that turbocharges fermentation, then shoves everything together, only to trigger a nasty, foul stench. The main character pinches his nose, sniffing that awful smell, and he can't wrap his head around why he keeps getting turned around even in another world. Meanwhile, Shaw just tells himself it's all for the good of the country. It stinks like hell, but he knows that smell from his childhood, back in the village where sewage trucks rumbled through the streets, and his parents lived just blocks away, so he crushes the tablets and tosses them right in. Suddenly, Rubia bursts in, pinches her nose, and snaps. "What is that smell?" He told her to stay home because it's dangerous, and then said, "Plug your nose right now." She bursts into a scream, "I don't get what you're saying." Then she insists the master can't possibly miss the instant the student finally catches on. The girl closes in, then recoils fast, turning away because the stench hits like a punch to the nose. And yeah, the show makes it clear he warned her. The boy tells her to watch, but not to get too close. Fermentation has kicked into overdrive, so this liquid needs nitrates. He's going to pull them right out of here, because nitrates dissolve like crazy in water. He has to drop that substance into a pot of water and heat it up with magic. And trust me, whatever happens, it's not going to feel good for whoever has to deal with it. Once every product's done, they crank the kettle and let the water evaporate because now the pot's walls are crusted in thick, white, needle-sharp crystals, nitro crystals. The mixture's full of impurities, but if you keep recrystallizing it again and again, you can crank the purity way up. Rubia asks if it's a fire potion, and Sho shuts that down. Nope, it's just an ingredient. Tomorrow, he'll head back to the workshop and finish the job because he's trying to make gunpowder. And besides the powder, he still needs charcoal and sulfur. The girl blurts out that it's weird he can turn something that smells this awful into anything at all. And the main character tells her it's made from trash, so she asks if it's from her trash, leaving him totally stumped, like he doesn't even know what to say. Rubia erupts in rage and screams at him, while Stella is cackling in the workshop because Shaw actually forged a weapon out of Rubia's excrement. Then the one beside her snaps in anger and can't stop blushing. The girl says, "So that's why he reeks." And the main guy insists, "I washed up and my clothes look clean too," while he starts to doubt his own nose. Steel sweeps a cleansing spell over him, and the boys stun she can wipe out odors like they were never there. And it's weirdly convenient. She leans in and fires off the question. "So what are you planning to do with these crystals?" He tells her he'll combine the saltpeter with sulfur and coal in a 7:2001 ratio, then orders her to grind every last bit as fine as she can and mix it until it's perfectly blended. Stella blurts out, "Wait, so this is really a weapon?" And the show tells her, "Go on, try it, because you only need a tiny amount, and it shoots out air to stop anything from igniting." The main character strikes a candle to it, and the whole thing bursts into flames. Stella gasps, "So what does that even mean?" The show insists, "Press it later," and the girl blurts out. Stunned then, he explains you've got to soak it with water, wrap it in cloth, and only then press. The show claims it'll load, but they crank out a spell-driven compression the instant they can fast sew. The reaction hits harder and works more efficiently, and he breaks down the whole why. Once it dries and turns brittle, they magically smash it into granules, then kickstart the spark and make it ignite all over again. He grabs a candle and lights the gunpowder scattered on the fabric. Then the flames whir up, fierce and wild. Rubia says this is totally different. Stella swears it's incredible, and right now, the black powder is finally ready. He just had to ready exactly what he'd begged the dwarf master for, then haul it straight to Her Majesty. After a while, the queen leans in and asks if he's come up with anything new, and when the boy nods yes, he practically begs her to come see for herself. He pulls out a basic break-action weapon, and the barrel, along with its bullets, were forged by dwarf craftsmen. The girl blurts out what it is, and the boy grins as he explains there's gunpowder packed at the tube's end. Then he shoves a lead bullet right on top. He fires at the mannequin, and the bullet punches right through its armor. All three girls jerk, and Shocky blurts that the lead bullet tore free and slammed right through the armor. If someone in armor charges in, they'll slice straight through flesh, and even tough demons won't stop the blow. Leela blurts out, "Is this magic?" And the show shoots back, "Nope, it's not magic. It's science." She's freaking out, asking if even untrained folks can use it to blast monsters, and if peasants and girls stand a chance against them too. The boy gives in, and the queen, chin in hand, stares into the air as she admits, this truth is downright terrifying. Out of nowhere, the main character bursts into laughter, then leans in and asks what she's afraid of, because she's going to find a use for him, no matter what. And the girls just stare, completely baffled. The queen snaps, "Don't you dare joke with me." And the show obeys straight away. The main character refuses to sell weapons or gunpowder, saying they're needed to defend their country when danger hits. Gunpowder isn't just for battles. It helps teams blast apart stones to speed up coal extraction. Stella warns that if this curse spreads across the continent, it'll be like ripping open the gates of hell while Nobel built dynamite for civil projects. People wasted no time turning it into a weapon of war. The history of the old world proves it can't stay peaceful forever, and the main character refuses to let it fall into the same deadly mistake again. Lila admits that if this ends up in the clutches of someone powerful, war will ignite. But after the Harpy attack and what happened with Maluna, she finally realizes the demons are stirring and moving more than ever. The knights feel restless soon. They'll rise and start striking the townspeople and peasants. And that girl knows exactly what it means. As royalty, her family has to stand ready and fight for their people when the world turns cruel. She hands the weapons production over to the main character, and he tells her he gets it while Leela insists this has to stay locked down as a state secret. He chose to cook up gunpowder on his own time, but mass-producing it with other people was a disaster waiting to happen. One slip, and the whole recipe would leak. Once Her Highness slipped him a secret budget, he didn't waste a second. He stormed out to buy animal manure as raw material, convinced it would skyrocket their production efficiency. Their supplies keep piling up, but you got to handle the gunpowder like a live bomb. Friction or a stray burst of static could set it off in an instant. They soak it clean and smear it all across the castle. Then when the moment hits, they just wipe it dry with magic. Then he snapped and decided to forge yet another weapon. Then, after some time, they hauled the anti-aircraft gun to the range and fired off the salvo. And boom, an explosion tore through the air. Kaka and Taika both shout that it's awesome because they're the twin brothers of Chika. The guys used to be hunters, and they swear it all comes down to their razor-sharp eyesight. Kaka claims it's their vision. Taika even says, "Yeah, I'd do the same." They can spot an animal from 1,000 kilometers away, so they chose defense. The main character grins and says, "Relax, I'm already way too close," and Leela beams because he's finally flown off far away, then asks, "So how far can you fly?" Kaka swears he already blasted past 400 stops, and if he climbs just a bit higher, he's promising he'll streak past another 32. They've got a perfect parabola locked in their heads, just like the formula demands, and the show is acting like that's pure genius. Then the queen leans in and admits she never thought any of this could happen without magic. They ask, "Can we use this tube and that magical dust to cast the same kind of magic?" The main character nods, agrees, and vows he'll keep it secret, then warns them not to bring the powder along, and the guys instantly fall in line. Leela strides up to the Chick brothers, declares they're the perfect fit for the job, and tells them they'll be shooting on the show starting today. The girl adds that their pay will rise based on how hard they work. The guys thank her, and Leela snaps that the main character must keep forging defensive weapons. The girl blurts that Raziel was crushed to find out the main character had been so swamped he never even showed up, and Sho instantly turns red, muttering that it was just painfully awkward. She tells everyone the dig teams keep grinding in the coal mines. The craftsmen are still busy in their workshops, and the roads and bridges, ones he ordered them to build, are under construction right now. She adds that they won't get time off anytime soon to show off their inventions, then turns to him like, "So why aren't you coming to see us yet?" The boy nods, promises he'll do it without doubt, and the main character grins wide because now it's time to gear up for the festival's biggest showdown. In front of that massive column, the main character blurts out, stunned, "It's enormous." It rolled into the castle workshop because the blast furnace was already waiting, and the show calls it nothing short of amazing. The main characters showed off the key mechanisms, and then Mr. Russell teamed up with the dwarves, using everything they knew to finish the blast furnace. The man brags that the wildest part is how he taught them to make coke himself. Before, they had to use magic just to crank up the heat, but now this furnace lets them shoot iron out without a single spell. The blast furnace has to breathe. Yet everyone acts like magic is doing the job, so Sho digs into the truth. In the original world, steam engines pump the air, and he's determined to get that system running ASAP. But building an external heat engine or an internal combustion engine isn't just a try-it project, it's brutally hard work. And even with all the know-how, they'd still have to grind for a long time before any of it could actually power their world. The show swears Russell and his crew can build an engine like that if someone teaches them the basics. But even then, they'll still have to crank out a working model first. Right then, the guy beside Sho whips around and tells him, "Thanks for all your hard work." Sho nods as he says everyone's putting in the grind, and Resale fires back, "Yeah, we are." He's boasting that they've actually laid a trolleybus line right inside the castle walls. So hauling coal and moving goods has become ridiculously convenient. The man declares trolleybuses will roar through coal mines everywhere, and the guy cheers because things are finally going right. Then the man nods and calls it the start of a whole new era. Roads and bridges got hammered into place just to reach the mines. And then coal started rolling in 2 or 3 wagons at a time because the world's thirst for energy kept climbing higher and higher. The city's suddenly buzzing, more and more people are hearing about what's being built here, and the main character steps into the street only to spot something that catches his eye. He can't stop staring at this massive masterpiece when a young guy slides up to him and bluntly asks, "So, are you the owner?" The man beams that they were lucky to snag the master, shoves the main character inside, and declares he's got the most amazing goods in the world. He can't even catch what's going on before they demand, "So what kind of shop is this?" Then he spots the man beside him staring in panic, and it hits him. This is a criminal place, and that's why fear is gripping them both. The man quizzes him, asking which servants he likes best, and the main character can't hide his shock, realizing there are actually servants here. He recalls how advanced or not this world really is, and he gets why servants are right here, ready to serve. He didn't clock it at first, since he wasn't even in the castle meanwhile. Her Majesty just keeps hiring as many servants as she needs, no matter what the pay demands. The man jabs a finger at one of the servants and says, "Need a bodyguard? This guy's the real deal. He used to be a warrior." Then he smirks. All he wants is 50 gold coins. And honestly, that's a steal. The main character snaps that he doesn't buy servants and that it's flat out unacceptable to him. He's stunned. He hates having servants around. He claims this place is full of kids from shattered merchant families and busted provincial nobles, so they quietly take in anyone with nowhere else to go. Privately, yeah, in the show they liken it to some global protection system. The man insists someone will eventually buy them, but the servant can only hope he's the one who gets the deal. The show cuts out and thanks him, and the main character is already ready to storm out until a second guy with a terrified stare blocks his path and tells him smart people can help them. He also tells him the girls upstairs can read, write, and count, then dares them to check for themselves. Show realizes they're not going to let him off that easily, so the main character nods and says, "Fine, I'll just take a look." He tells you, "I'll be downstairs, so don't rush, take your time, and really look around." But when the main character looks up, he spots tons of beautiful girls, and in a snap, it hits him. This place feels like it's reserved only for the truly important, like a luxury car showroom. Suddenly, Shaw spots a breathtaking girl, and his mind races. She has to be a former aristocrat, or at least she reeks of high-born secrets. He can't wrap his head around it, this weird pull. Like she's dressed in way too much beauty to be real. And then, out of nowhere, the girl stands up from the chair and strides right up to him. She strides up to the bars and drops into a deep bow. She blurts out thanks for coming to get her, calls him Mr. Zero, and Show's jaw drops because he's suddenly realizing Maria's words about Zero were real. The boy figures she's tied to Zero too, snaps that he isn't Zero, he's the real master, and asks if she knows him. She nods and tells him, "Yeah, Zero is my master." He blurts out, "Do you know Maria from the shelter, and did you treat her illness?" And the girl nods hard, answering, "Yes." She claims she purified streptomycin and then injected it into Maria, and the main character's jaw drops, because in his world, that drug is strictly for tuberculosis, and he's stunned she somehow knows about something that doesn't even exist here. The show barrels down the stairs and shouts for the man to come upstairs. Already at the top, he fires off the question, "Who do you like?" And the main character shoots straight up, points to a girl, and blurts out, "I like her." He boasts that a real master's got a sharp eye, and then praises her as a genius and ace at reading, writing, and counting. The boy asks, "How much is it?" And the man smirks, saying he'll sell it to him for 250 gold coins. The man's jaw drops at the price. He can't wrap his head around where it even came from. Then he admits the girl isn't just smart, she's insanely skilled. When they finally caught her, they pay for it in blood. So many people were ripped away. He freezes in shock, wondering if it's really true, then blurts that he's got only 100 in his pocket, while one guy glares at him like he's about to explode, and the other just thinks he's playing around. The boy lights up with an idea. He hands them a fruit and asks, "Will this fit?" Lisi blurts that it's a tiny fruit up for sale, and the other guy just stares, because even a trashy, rotten piece still sells for 100 gold, while this raspberry hits 300 to 400 gold. He grins and says, "I'll just settle for berries to make up for the missing gold." And the show's like, Lil Murch's berry stash costs a fortune, what a loss, before finally calming down as the girl is thrown free from the cage. Her name's Nanami, and she answers his questions with calm precision, but she barely gives anything away, leaving him wondering if Maria has any clue about what's really going on. After a while, Maria blurts, "Why did you bring me here?" The main character asks if she knows them. She nods and says, "Yeah, it's a doll that Mr. Zero brought." And the show doesn't even get what she means. The girl admits she first thought it was one of his own people, but then Zero-sama shuts it down. Nope, it's a robot. In shock, the main character blurts out if Danami is a robot or something just like one, and Danami answers that really a robot fits her best, because the series keeps hinting she has no free will and runs on programming. The girl fires back that he's right, and the show reels in shock. She blurts out that she's soft and that she runs warm with her own body heat, while he's convinced she's basically human, clocking every little detail like her hair, her moist lips, her even teeth, and that slick trail of saliva. The boy leaned in so close to the girl he might as well be nose to nose. Trying to stare straight into her mouth, Maria stood right there, stunned beyond belief. The show scrambled to apologize, and then he demanded answers, asking Anami where Zero was and what Zero even was, because he swore someone like that could pull off something like that. She shot back that her body was pure biology, spilled that their breakup came from an accident, and admitted she had no clue where he'd vanished, while the main character confessed he'd been praying they'd somehow track down where he is now. She thinks everything's going to be okay as long as he's close, and then she urges him to come back to them again. After a while, the main character leans in and asks Nanami about the square root of 2. She explains exactly how many digits he's asking for, and he fires back that he needs 10 decimal places. The girl confidently tells him the number he needs is 1.414212422623, and before anyone can blink, Show demands she shout the cube root of 2. She answers instantly with 1.259212001. 0.259210199, leaving the main character staring in pure amazement. He crunched numbers like they were nothing, and no matter how many digits you threw at him, the answer snapped into place instantly. So the show dubs him a human computer. Don't dare judge her skills while she wrestles the machine. He daydreams in his own head, so he just randomly screws together a gear. With those tricky rotary cycloidal gear wheels, he used to need brutal calculations. But now he snaps the designs into his mind fast and draws them out with flawless accuracy. She's a real bio-CNC machine. He thought he'd been tricked, but in his world, something like that would cost them millions of dollars. Then the main character remembers a man who tells him they're hoping to see him again, and her knowledge? It's worth more than money could ever buy. Zero's got the strongest assistant he's ever faced, and the main character's convinced he can build anything he imagines. Soon, the main character and Layla dove into the car, slammed the door, and peeled out, while the girl blurted, "This is amazing." She shoots him a question. Does this look like his horseless carriage? He nods right away, then grins and says, "No, call it a car, because it runs all on its own." That girl loves the name, and the main character fires back. It's a machine no exhaustion like a horse, so it can run all day as long as it's got water and fuel. Leela tells him that when he first dragged the new girl in, she had no clue what to make of her. But now she's sure this invention is huge, and the guy still can't figure out which girl she's talking about. When the masters heard about Nanami, they nearly punished him on the spot. But he snapped into action, performed the craft with razor-sharp precision, and when Ami showed up and it all worked, they saw his full potential. So he built a steam engine. But here's the thing, this engine runs on steam. It burns coal to heat water, then the steam races through the pipes and gets switched left and right to the pistons, hammering out that powerful back-and-forth motion. That back-and-forth motion gets grabbed by a crank and flywheel, spun into rotation, then the power shoots straight to the wheels to make them roll. This engine is the most famous steam engine in its whole world, and honestly, it feels sketchy as an invention because half the details are missing. Yet somehow, they still pull off something that looks and works just like the real thing. Nanami's mind blasts the idea forward, renders the full model, feeds it into the machine, and now it's just a matter of assembly. That's their whole work cycle, start to finish. He personally fired up the kettle and fed every tiny tube through the system, tossing in his own wild flare. Only problem is it's painfully slow, topping out at just 30 to 40 kilometers per hour right now. And the girl immediately asks, can it go faster? The queen leans in and tells the main character to speed up, because she's convinced it'll get even more exciting the faster it goes. Faster and faster. She swears Her Highness is obsessed with speed, then tells her he can push even faster if he had more gears before, warning her that the roads are bumpy and going faster would be deadly. But if they lay down that railway, they'll zip through town faster and safer. Lila just can't get what he's talking about, while Sho swears it's just like the railway they built inside the castle. And once it links the country to those coal mines, everything starts running way faster. He adds that if they lay more railways between cities, people and goods will move in a rush. And he's dead set on using that same rail-driven spark because railroads powered the Industrial Revolution in his world, and he wants this one to do the same. The show flat out warns, This won't be cheap or quick, because it's not just about their country. It's about shaping the entire world. After a moment, Maluna blurts out, stunned and genuinely awestruck. She blurts that it's fun and totally unfair, and Layla fires back that the girl should quit the show if it's really so fun. Then she turns and asks, "Can I?" So the girl wastes no time. She grabs the driver's seat and takes the wheel, and the main character can't believe it when Princess Maluna is the one driving. Easy driving, it feels like an automatic, one gear, no clutch, no shifting at all. Maluna leans in and asks Hey if he'll sell her that car. The girl hands him an offer of 500 gold coins, and he freezes, because to him, that's insanely huge. Until he realizes, back in his world, it would be a whopping 100 million yen. He asks if it's just a little, and the princess snaps back that it's not enough. She wants to work on it. Sell the same thing, and the girl declares it a natural investment. The main character realizes this plan is brilliantly built, and a fierce hunger for business ignites in his chest. Some details are tough to repeat, but he's sure she's sharp as a tack. It might take time, yet they'll nail mass production in the end. He knows that sooner or later, he's going to have to walk away from her car for good. The master got a close-up look at the steam engine's mechanism the machine had built, and then he jumps straight into the workshop to start making his own steam engine. The man brags it's a smart design, but it all started when they built a steam engine just to haul coal carts. This was supposed to need 5 to 10 years of brutal research, but somehow they built a real moving car in just a month and a half. At last, the festival day crashed in, and Farling stepped up to unveil his invention. At the festival, the queen steps up before everyone, lifts her voice, and pours out her heartfelt thanks for showing up. The girl tells him right before the festival even starts, he's got to lean over and say a few words while everyone's eyes lock on the show. And the moment he realizes it, he's totally lost. The main character steps up, flashes a big grin, and greets everyone. "Ladies and gentlemen, good evening." Then he introduces himself like a true showman, and the guy declares he's a student of Master Rubia. He tells them they're heading straight to the castle's exhibition halls, inside and out, so they can see firsthand how their country has built everything in its own way. But the main character cracked them open, and it was him, grinding through trial and error, who finally brought them to life like this. He remembers every craftsman buddy he's ever had, brags about the makers from his homeland, and shines a spotlight on the material crew that keeps them supplied. The boy echoes what Her Highness Princess Layla said, claims his dream for the people gets backed by countless hearts, then lifts his hand and begs for a love-along with kindness. Suddenly, fireworks erupted over the castle, blasting the sky with dazzling flashes, and everyone froze in shock. Even with time screaming at him to hurry, he still nailed the fireworks' exact colors: orange from sodium salts, white from tin, and green from copper packed inside an everyday bamboo cane tube. And just like that, the main character was yanked back to those toy mortars he'd built in his workshop. The spark that launched all his wild inventions, and out in the crowd, one guy blurted that fireworks were pure wonder. Rubia stares in awe at a stunning painting when Sho suddenly slides up, tells her she's a master, and leaves her stunned, then urges her to step outside the city for a moment. People stream through the market as a guy thrusts a skewer of food into a girl's hands and tells her to hold it, and she just smiles back. "Thank you, Rubia." The girl shoots him a look and asks if he's really sure he has to walk like that, because today he's acting like a superstar. Then the main character grins, reassures her everything's under control, and walks straight into the business meetings, confident that Her Highness will handle the rest. Rubia flashes a grin and tells him that everything in her life flipped the moment he showed up. She remembers how badly she craved a peaceful life in the forest, and the boy, baffled, blurted out that he's sorry this happened. Then Ruby grinned and told him, "It's okay. Everything's fine." The girl tells him, "If I'd stayed in that forest for so long, then nothing at all would have happened between us." She glances at him, all awkward, and insists she doesn't feel that way. Then the boy's cheeks flare red, and he's completely lost, like he has no idea what she's talking about. The girl's cheeks flared red, and she blurted out that she had to apologize to him. Ruby tells him, "If you're this strong right now, I'll recommend you to the Imperial College for official recognition as a real master, then you can keep riding your journey forward." She leans in and asks why she didn't go through with it. Then he's still bright red, and he blurts out that maybe she just wanted to stay close to him. He spins away and tells her straight up he's not playing along with these formalities, and he won't budge from the far lane. Not with her, and not with her, and not without her. Then he adds that he needs to apologize. He finally spills the truth behind his secret, years-long silence, Then Rubia's jaw drops, because it was him all along, hiding it from them. His fear is loud in his chest, but he still tells her he came from another world. When she snaps her eyes open, astonishment hits her like a shockwave. Suddenly, one townsman jabs his finger at the sky and yells, "What's up there?" And the guy beside him snaps back, "It's too dark to see." Someone insists it's a bird. Then the second voice snaps back that it's way too huge to be one, and a man yells that it's closing in fast. His eyes go wide. No way, that can't be true until the truth hits, and it's revealed. It's a dragon. A monstrous beast crashes into the city, and everyone bolts for their lives, shrieking in terror while our main character just freezes, wide-eyed, shocked by this dragon's terrifying presence. A dragon sweeps over the city, and everyone drops to the ground in pure panic. Then, like it got bored, it just lifts off and vanishes into the sky, leaving the main character staring as confusion spreads through the crowd, until someone blurts out, "Did it really just fly away?" The man blurts out, "What was that about?" And the show whips around to Rubia. "Are you okay?" And Rubia smiles back. "Everything's fine." She told everyone she'd headed back to the castle, and he snapped with worry. He'd heard the demon count was climbing, but he never imagined dragons would show up in the city for real. Right now, they're locked in a business meeting inside the castle, and we only need to fill the queen in so she doesn't burst into panic. Quietly, the main character tells Leela that a dragon has shown up in the city. Leela doesn't buy it at all, and she demands he explain exactly what he's talking about. Next morning, Mizuki reached him from the Empire and fired off a messenger bird with a letter tied to its leg. Then the queen tore it open and announced that dragons had smashed into the Empire overnight. She goes pale after reading the letter because the Empire is burning under the dragon's fire. Cho snaps to attention and realizes it's the exact beast they saw yesterday. While Layla drops the bombshell, he flew west. She blurts out her question to Her Majesty, and the moment the girl's face crumples with pure horror, she tells him, heart racing, that he'll end up back here again. Everyone gasped. Then the queen snapped an order to evacuate Mizuki right away, while Shaw gripped the moment and wondered if the Empire and the city were really about 400 kilometers apart, and how fast dragons could possibly fly. Stella tells him they're soaring at around 50 to 60 leagues per hour, and he fires back, "Yeah, about 60 leagues an hour. 1 league is roughly 1.6 kilometers, which translates to about 100 kilometers per hour. So if we factor in the time it takes Mizuki's letter to get there, then in the worst case, that dragon barrels in within 2 hours. He quizzes Stella and Feifei about whether they've ever battled dragons because, in his mind, they must have lived forever, and Stella blurts out, stunned, "No," then shoots him a sharp look. "Don't bring up her age, kid. Imagine they can just block incoming fire with magic." Then the girl snaps back, reminding him they're not dealing with normal stuff. They're talking about legendary creatures. The elf claims the dusty old books swear at dragons once hunted, devoured people, and scorched whole continents with their fire breath. Xiao and Rubia stare in shock at Rubia's words, and just like that, the main character's head starts pounding, while a choked-up urge to cry claws at him. So Layla snaps that they've got to do something. Right now, the man bursts in and proposes a desperate plan: evacuate everyone from town and shove them into the forest. He turns to the seer and demands an answer. She snaps back at once. The show orders her to flood the city with the beast people and shout warnings to everyone. Their mission: get the residents to sprint into the forest, dressed in whatever they're wearing. The maid nods, says she's got it, and bolts out into the chaos. He snaps that he'll set the defensive cannons on the rampart and get them loaded for battle, even though he has no clue if they'll actually stop the dragon still. Just the threat might scare them off and keep them at bay. Rubia blurted that she'd fight, and Stella snapped that this was her lifelong dream. But then Stella worried her magic might not stand a chance against something this massive, while Rubia insisted she only needs 1 shot, and Shaw said, "Yeah, that's more than enough." He turns to Leela and begs her to evacuate, only she doesn't get a word, swearing she'll never abandon her people, and it instantly crushes Show's heart with worry. The main character snaps an order to the Chinkar brothers: load the mortars right now and haul them to the eastern rampart, and they immediately nod and agree. He's got 6 bullets on him. Though there was 1 extra, it was handed straight to Countess Maluna for safekeeping. And now he's setting out to magically dry the gunpowder in his pack. On the streets, beastmen are screaming that a dragon's coming, and the girls are yelling at everyone to sprint straight into the forest. The little girl tubs her dress and blurts out to her older sister, "What happens to Farley if a dragon shows up?" Maria leans in, reassures her, and swears she's sure the host of the show will protect them, but the man's screaming at his assistants, demanding to know what they're doing, pushing them to get out of there right now, while his students hustle to pack up the tools, and one of them blurts, "We need the tools." The master leans in and tells them, "If you make it out alive, you'll earn new ones," then slams the order into them, "Leave everything behind and run." 4 hours have slammed by since Mizuki's message, and now the night guard marches in to tell the queen the crossbow has finally been fired. She quizzed him, asking if the residents had already fled, and he answered, "Yeah, they're gone." Layla snapped that the dragons still hadn't shown up, but they couldn't slack. They had to stay on standby and keep everything ready. He figured it would have been smarter to stay away. Then he slipped in quietly and begged the dragon to take the walk somewhere else. Suddenly, a bright flash rips across the sky, and the guys snap their heads toward the host to stare up while the main character panics and blurts out that he can see it. Kaka swears it's a dragon, and Taika lets out a terrified scream because it's coming. The main character grills Nanami, asking his exact dimensions and height. Then she drops the bomb. The dragon's wingspan is 54 meters, and its flight height climbs to 12 meters. Show notes swear it's impossible, but Nanami insists the dragon somehow wipes out the laws of physics while the man just smirks like he always knew. Leela leans in and asks what they're even talking about, and Sho whips around to tell her that, in theory, flying with a body like that and wings like those is impossible. He figures the dragon uses magic to get lighter, and the girl goes wide-eyed because he actually thinks dragons can cast spells. Nanami snaps that the dragon's height has already climbed to 900 meters. Beh. Stella, Rubia, and Leela all panic. Then Nanami adds, breathless, that the dragon has dropped down to 800 meters. The boy snaps his head up, and his eyes widen as the dragon barrels toward him. A dragon with its jaws wide open rockets through the sky toward them, and the Chick brothers freeze in pure terror. Then the host snaps in, telling them to stop shrinking back, and remembers the intersection point, even as the beast hangs already 200 meters above the ground. Antika blurts that there's still a tiny bit left. The show barked, "Shoot now!" and the guys clapped their hands over their ears as a volley exploded through the air. The boy screams, "You hit it!" and the dragon takes the attack head-on, getting wrecked. They have to hunker down and hide from the brutal wind, because the dragon bellows and charges right up to the protective wall, and the queen screams at everyone to stay calm, brace up, and get ready for impact. Then she orders every cannon to light up and fire. People unleash crossbow bolts, and those arrows slam into the dragon. Then Tika and Kaka fire again, right on the heels of the last shot. The dragon is sealed behind protective magic, and the main character is stunned, while Leela can't believe he's even capable of casting spells. Suddenly, it hits him. If he doesn't shatter the dragon's protective magic right now, his master's spell won't reach him at all. Right then, wham! Another explosion rocks the scene. Rage burns through the monster, and the main character's panic hits like a tidal wave. They've got no clue Tika's screaming that he sees a car, and the guy's jaw drops in pure shock. He shouts that it's Princess Maluna. Then, no joke, the girl grips the wheel, and everyone's blown away. They even strapped a mortar to the car. The show calls it absurd, Leela, and Leela snaps back that, yeah, this is totally Maluna. The show clocks that his dragon's protective magic is slipping fast. He snaps that the sudden assault threw him off and wrecked his focus. Then he roars at Ruby, "Hurry!" She whirls to Stella and demands protective magic. Stella shrieks, nods like she gets it, and yells for her friend to come smash every last one of them. Rubia barks orders for everyone to hit the ground. Then she unleashes an explosive spell, and her staff starts blazing with light. Xiao strides up to Lila and warns her to stay careful. As soon as the spell breaks, the dragon vanishes into thin air, leaving everyone frozen, not a single person knowing what to do next. Stella can't believe what just happened, points out the show that says there are no dragon tracks, then snaps for everyone to stay on guard, ordering anyone who can move to grab their crossbows and load the mortars. The boy went rigid and snapped his head. Up there stood the dragon, completely unhurt, charging in for another strike, while the main character stared in pure horror. The dragon rips into a savage roar, and the main character suddenly realizes it's about to unleash fire. But the queen snaps into action. She orders an evacuation and tells every employee to get out of the premises now. Stella stood in front of the show and shouted for everyone to line up behind her, promising her magic would sweep over them. Then she barked, "Hurry up." The dragon unleashes fiery breath, scorching towers and smashing everything in its path, from homes and railways to the shop counters. People in the forest keep staring while the boy clutches his book so tight his hands shake, convinced the castle is burning, and Nim is freaking out, especially about Mr. Shaw. Stella's last ounce of strength fights back the raging flames, while Five-Face shields Lila with all she's got. The attack finally crashes to a stop, and she drops, utterly spent. Then the show's voice cuts through, and he sprints to her, just as the castle and everything around it erupts in flames. The main character gets hit by that crushing power, and in the same breath, he realizes Stella has already burned through every last drop of magic. If that flame flares again, it's game over. They've got to strike first before he decides to hit again, and the guy can't figure out how anyone's supposed to stop him. Mortars and Ruby's magic both slam into his scales and bounce off, and that's when Sho realizes they can't do a damn thing. The main character panics. If he stops right now and lets his mind spiral, then this is exactly where everything ends. He thought it was brutal trying to hit a spot with no marks, so he immediately called Five-Face and told her to aim right at his eye. The girl stares like she has no clue what he's talking about, but the boy grins and says he's got a plan. Then the dark elf girl snaps, says, "I get it," and launches forward. She knocks an arrow, looses a deadly shot, and nails the target while the dragon seethes with pure rage. Leela snaps, "Why are you raging like this? If that flame shows up again, we're done for." And Sho leans in and admits it's the whole point. He plans to unleash his double activation magic straight into the dragon's open maw. The main character marches up to the Chikaka brothers and orders them to ready the mortar, so they do it. But Sho clocks it instantly. The moment it's set, the mortar's going to snap. Now he's got to throw everything he's got at it. The main character chants the spell, dumps every last drop of magic into it, snaps the air with 2 sharp squeezes, and shoves it into the weapon. So the Chika brothers finally realize fire is on the way. The main character barks out the signal to attack, and just like that, their cannons erupt into fire. During the show, the air suddenly tightens like a trap. Boom, an explosion erupts and blasts everyone backward. A charred dragon crashes down with a thunderous rumble, and he crawls out from under the rubble, praying it worked. Then he looks down and demands, "Is it dead?" The boy grabs her by the shoulders, shakes her back to reality, and demands to know if she's okay. Then he keeps urging her to snap out of it as Shaw steps in and tells her, with full certainty, "We killed the dragon." The girl scans the room and demands, "Is anyone alive?" Then she orders the living to scream it out, and the survivors erupt in victory shouts, loud and proud. Ruby barreled into him, sobbing as she clung to him, and he breathed out that he was just relieved she was safe. Stella and Faithy too. Stella shot back that they almost got killed thanks to his magic, and he burst into laughter, then threw out an apology, like he meant every word. The girl snaps that he's a seriously bad, super dangerous student and bans him from using compression magic. While the main character keeps pressing her, "Why is he even wearing that bandage?" Ruby blurts out why they fear her, because if anyone digs deeper, her power spills out. The show quizzes her again, and she points to the terrifying combo: scorching temperatures, crushing pressure, and plasma blazing like pure destruction. He finally gets what she's saying and blurts that it's a thermonuclear reaction. Stella goes dead quiet for a second, then snaps back, asking what that even means. He tells you the whole universe is built from microscopic bits, and once those bits get crushed again and again and blasted with insane heat, they snap apart and fly outward. Then they crash together and fuse, and right after that boom, they suddenly drop weight. The girl blurts, "So what happens if we lose weight?" And the show answers with a wild truth: that weight gets turned into energy, and it scales like the speed of light, squared. She asks the hero how fast the speed of light really is, and he blurts out 300,000 kilometers per second. Then after a quick second thought switches it to 187,500 leagues, since a league is about 1.6 kilometers, and the girl just stares like, "That's an insane amount." Stella presses him, asking how he's able to talk so easily about something that's been forbidden for ages, and where he even learned it. He blushes a little, then decides to spill every last detail anyway. He calls them close and commands their attention, insisting he's not from here. He's come to them from another world. Feifei, Layla, and Stella stay stone calm. He can't wrap his head around it, and he's honestly stunned. Stella just smirks like, "Told you so," while Layla teases, "You're a little late to say that," and the show can't believe their wild reaction. The girl insists she never bought it. She's sure she would have known someone like that no matter what so. When the boy hears her doubt, he's stunned, and he fires back that it honestly sounds totally believable. He stares at Rubia and demands, "Did you believe me?" She nods and says she had a bad feeling like this from the start, and then the main character shows up completely stunned. The queen snaps that it doesn't matter where he came from, then points out the whole city and castle are falling apart. So if Farlane wants to slip back into his old book, he'll need their help. Rubia leans in and fires a question at Shaw. "Are you really staying with us?" But the main character bows to Her Majesty and his lord, then freezes. No words come out, and he can't stop wondering what he'd do if he ever got the chance to come back to this world. The show can't decide if he'll come back yet. He keeps posting videos again, just like always. But he had no clue what came next, and when it mattered, he shut the answer down. Because in that other world, he was surrounded by faceless followers, while here, he finally had real friends. He'd rather live right there with the people of Farlane, since he sees them every single day so. The show grins and insists he'll keep ruling as a lord from the castle of Farlane. Every girl's grinning like they just won, and you can't help but wonder what they're planning with that dragon Layla fires back. "Duh, we tear it apart and melt it into gold." Stella nods along she and the girl agree. Dragons cost a fortune. They point out that when those rotten bodies were found a few hundred years ago, all that wealth stacked up so hard they could buy a small country, and now even the place is still fresh. Two and the girl fires back with quick, approving hand gestures. She claims the big gallbladder can actually heal you if you trust what the books say, but if there are stones in it, you're in for a brutal, expensive nightmare. The main character blurts out a question about meat. Stella totally misunderstands. Show asks straight up if you can even eat dragon meat, and the girl gives this vague, nowhere answer. Suddenly, Nami blurts out that dragon meat is totally edible, and I'm like, whoa, good girl, all proud, while he's salivating like crazy, thinking, so today we're feasting on dragon steak and hamburgers too? The boy sprints straight at the dragon, and the main character can't help but wonder, could dragon bones make broth? While Rubia loses it, furious at what he's doing, Leela grins and blurts that Shaw's curiosity has zero off switch, which is exactly why they can't get enough of him. Stella flashes a grin and tells him she's jealous because he thinks outside the box and asks real questions with honest curiosity, and in her eyes, he's an absolute master. A year later, Farlane is still clawing his way back to health and under the rebuilt walls. A dragon's remains now stand as the city's newest symbol. Ever since they bounced back, every resident's been waiting with bated breath for the country to finally rise. But the job's far from done, and he's just trying to keep to himself when Leela sneaks up behind him, starting up again about how he's cooking up those wild, weird theories. Sha bursts in with her latest theory, one that lets them talk even when they're miles apart, and then proves it. Leela will be able to grin and chat with Princess Maluna right from inside the castle. The queen is practically vibrating with excitement, demanding, "Can we do it? When will we be able to?" And he just stares back and says, "I don't know." Stella and Rubia step into the room, and her host grins, saying he's still busy working. Then the other girl immediately asks for a snack, and the guy laughs it off, agrees on the spot, and offers them pancakes.